Hello story enthusiasts. Welcome to Eclipse Wizardry. Today we venture into, what if Viktor Krum's sister and Gabrielle both branded Harry age 9 and Durmstrang Veela war began. Your support means everything, like and subscribe. Enjoy. Chapter 1, The Burning. The summer gathering at Cavendish Court happened every 3 years, and it was exactly as tedious as it sounds. It was the kind of event where important magical families from across Europe descended on a rented manor just outside London, dressed in their finest robes, drank wine charmed to stay precisely the right temperature, and talked loudly about things that mattered to them and no one else. Alliances were made over hors d'oeuvres. Old grudges were aired with the polished viciousness of people who'd had decades to sharpen them. Children were dragged along as accessories and largely forgotten once the adults found someone interesting to argue with. Harry Potter had been forgotten approximately 11 minutes after arriving. He didn't mind. Forgotten was comfortable. Forgotten meant no one was watching when he slipped a bread roll into his pocket, and no one noticed when he drifted away from the Dursleys' rigid little cluster near the entrance and found himself wandering the east wing of the manor, where the good paintings were, the kind that moved and occasionally offered commentary on the guests walking past. "That boy has jam on his collar," one portrait announced as Harry passed. An elderly witch in oils peered at him over half-moon spectacles. "It's not jam," Harry said. "It's from yesterday. I didn't have time to." He stopped. Arguing with a painting. Right. He was 9 years old, and he was arguing with a painting because there was no one else to talk to. He kept walking. The Dursleys had come because Vernon had business. Some kind of contract that apparently required pretending to be adjacent to magic for one evening, which Vernon bore with the expression of a man swallowing glass. Petunia had spent the first 10 minutes in the entrance hall gripping her purse like it might escape. Dudley had immediately located the dessert table and planted himself there. None of them had looked for Harry since, and Harry had made a science of not giving them reason to. He found a window seat at the end of a long corridor, tucked behind a curtain that smelled like cedar and old books, and sat with his knees drawn up, watching the grounds below through wavy antique glass. The gardens were lit with floating lanterns that drifted between the hedgerows in slow, lazy arcs. He could see people down there too, children, mostly, running between the adults' legs, chasing the lanterns, doing the kinds of things children did when the evening was warm and the adults were distracted. Harry watched them and ate his bread roll. He was not, technically speaking, a child who knew he was magical. Or rather, he knew things happened around him that didn't happen around other people. He knew that when Dudley's gang had cornered him behind the school gym and there was nowhere to run, he'd ended up on the roof somehow. He knew that when Mrs. Fig forgot to pick him up and left him standing in the rain, his hair had stayed dry. Small things. Constant, quiet, impossible things that he'd learned very early never to mention. But sitting in a magical manor, watching enchanted lanterns drift through hedgerows below, something in his chest recognized all of it the way you recognize a song you've heard in a dream. He pressed his palm flat against the cold glass and felt the faint hum of the manor's enchantments vibrating back against his skin. He was still sitting there when the argument started. It began as a raised voice somewhere below him, a woman's voice, clipped and precise, with an accent he didn't recognize. Then a second voice, deeper, heavily accented in a different way entirely, the consonants hard as stone. Harry leaned sideways on the window seat to look down at a different angle and could just make out two figures in the garden below, a tall woman in silver robes, dark-haired and sharp-jawed, standing very close to a broad man in burgundy who had the look of someone who'd played a physical sport for most of his life and hadn't entirely stopped. They were arguing about something Harry couldn't hear through the glass. Then the window behind him opened. He startled so hard he nearly fell off the seat, spinning around to find that it wasn't a person, it was the window itself, swinging inward on a gust of warm evening air, because this was a magical manor and apparently the windows had opinions about ventilation. The argument below drifted up to him clearly now. "Not your concern, Petrov." The girl acted without intent. "There is no claim. Intent is not the measure of a brand. You know this. The council knows this. The fact that you choose to pretend otherwise, I pretend nothing. I am telling you what the law says. The law says a branding stands regardless of intention or age. The law says, she is 8 years old. A pause. Then, the other one is 16. The other one knew exactly what she was doing. Harry had no idea what any of this meant. He leaned further out the window anyway, because something in the tone of it made the hair on the back of his neck prickle, the way the air prickles before lightning. A sound floated up from a different part of the garden, high and sudden. Not a scream exactly. More like a note, a single, ringing, almost musical sound that shouldn't have come from a human throat. Harry felt it in his teeth. Then the world went white. He would piece together what happened later, in fragments, the way you reconstruct a dream by chasing the edges of it. The girl had been running. That much he was certain of, because he'd seen her from the window before it happened, a small figure in pale blue with fair hair that seemed to catch more light than it should, sprinting across the garden with the particular urgency of a child being chased by another child. She'd been laughing. He remembered that too, the high bright sound of her laughter mixing with the argument from below before everything went sideways. The other girl had been standing near the far hedge. Older, 16 or thereabouts, with dark hair pulled back severely and the kind of posture that suggested someone had drilled it into her. She'd been watching the younger girl run, and there'd been something on her face that Harry, even from a distance, had recognized, the look of someone who was angry about something that had nothing to do with the person in front of them. He'd been at the window. The younger girl had run past the older girl. Their hands had touched, an accident, a brush of fingers, nothing. And then, the sound. That ringing, impossible note. And the light. Harry came back to himself sitting on the corridor floor with his back against the wall and both his palms on fire. Not literally. There was no flame. But the insides of his hands burned with the clean, specific intensity of a brand. He knew what a brand felt like because Dudley had pressed a penny heated on the stove against Harry's arm once, the summer he was 7, and this was exactly that except it came from inside the skin rather than outside it, and it covered both his palms from heel to fingertip, and it felt like something being written rather than something being destroyed. He looked at his hands. The left palm had a mark on it, a stylized angular pattern, geometric, the lines precise and almost architectural. It glowed faintly gold, then faded to a faint silvery scar-like impression on his skin. The right palm had a different mark. This one was curved and flowing, organic rather than geometric, with a shape at its center that he'd learn later was the traditional Veela sun sigil. It glowed in the same gold, faded the same way. He stared at both of them for a long moment. "Huh," Harry said. Then the corridor erupted. The tall woman in silver robes was first. She came around the corner at a pace that was technically walking but contained the energy of running, and when she saw Harry sitting on the floor she stopped dead, and the expression that crossed her face was something he didn't have a word for yet. Not quite horror. Not quite wonder. A complicated territory between the two. Behind her came the broad man in burgundy, and behind him, 2 more people. A stern woman in dark green robes with close-cropped gray hair, and a girl Harry had never seen before, maybe 16, who stopped in the doorway of the corridor and stared at him with an expression that was definitely something between horror and wonder but leaning harder toward the horror. The broad man said something in a language Harry didn't know. It sounded like it meant something significant. The woman in silver crouched in front of Harry, and up close she was extraordinarily beautiful in a way that made the air around her seem slightly more luminous, and she said, very carefully, in accented English, "You are all right? You are not hurt?" "My hands burn a bit," Harry said honestly. "But I'm all right." "What happened?" "Where are your parents?" the stern woman in green said. Her English was clipped and precise, the same voice from the argument in the garden. "My aunt and uncle are here somewhere." Harry looked at his palms again. The marks had fully faded to that faint scarring. "What are these?" The woman in silver made a sound that was almost a laugh, except it had too much tension in it for actual laughter. "Those," she said, "are brands." "What's a brand?" Nobody answered him immediately, which was answer enough that it was complicated. The girl in the doorway finally moved. She walked toward Harry with the deliberate, controlled movement of someone who was trying very hard to look calm, and she crouched down to his level. She was taller than him but crouched to be eye level, which Harry noticed, and she looked at his palms. She looked at her own right hand. There was a matching mark there, faded to the same scar impression. "I didn't mean to," she said. She was looking at the mark, not at him. "Katya." The broad man said her name like a warning. She ignored him. She looked up at Harry instead, and her eyes were dark and very direct, the kind of eyes that didn't look away from things. "I was angry about something else and my magic, it doesn't matter. I didn't mean to." "You made this happen?" Harry looked at his left hand, the geometric mark. "I don't know how," she said, and there was something fierce and embarrassed in it in equal measure. "I've never, brands don't work like this." "They're not, you're 9. I'm aware of that." She blinked. Then, very slightly, the corner of her mouth moved in a way that wasn't quite a smile but was the ghost of one. "You're not scared." "Should I be?" The sound from the garden again, that high, musical note, except softer this time, and Harry looked past Katya toward the doorway and there was another girl there now, being carried in by a woman with the same silver robes and the same overwhelming luminosity as the first woman. This one was smaller, 8 years old, maybe, with fair hair coming loose from its braids and eyes that were blue and enormous and currently fixed on Harry with the absolute unblinking attention of someone who has just seen something extraordinary. Her right hand, Harry noticed, had a mark on it too. She pointed at Harry's right hand. "That's mine," she said, in French-accented English, with the absolute confidence of an 8-year-old who has never been wrong about anything. Gabrielle, the first woman, her mother, clearly, said softly. "Shoo." "But it is." Gabrielle didn't shoo. She was still staring at Harry. "We match." "You match," Harry agreed, because it was true, and because he didn't see the point of pretending otherwise. The room, the corridor, the assembled adults, went very, very quiet. The sitting room they were moved to had the specific atmosphere of a room where people are trying not to shout. Someone had found the Dursleys, which was unfortunate for everyone. Vernon sat in a wingback chair near the door with his arms crossed and his face the color of a beetroot in autumn, while Petunia perched on the edge of the sofa beside him and looked as though she'd been told a very upsetting fact about the structural integrity of the floor. Dudley had come too, still clutching a miniature eclair, and stood near the window looking confused. Across from them, the broad man, whose name turned out to be Dmitri Volkov, and who was apparently some kind of official at a school called Durmstrang, sat very straight and radiated controlled fury. Beside him was Katya, who sat with her hands folded in her lap and her jaw set. Apollon Delacour, the woman in silver robes, Gabrielle's mother, sat with Gabrielle pressed against her side, still watching Harry with those huge blue eyes. Apollon was speaking in quiet, rapid French to a second woman whom Harry gathered was some kind of family representative. And in the armchair directly across from Harry sat the stern woman in green robes, who had introduced herself as Mirela Sarkova and who was apparently from the International Confederation of Wizards, and who looked like a woman holding 17 different problems in her head simultaneously and managing all of them with effort. Harry sat on a low ottoman near the center of the room, which had been an accident, someone had pointed him there, and which meant he was technically in the middle of everyone. He looked at his hands again. Still marked. Still his. "The situation," Sarkova said, in the tone of someone calling a meeting to order, "is as follows. 2 separate branding events occurred simultaneously, targeting the same individual. This is," she paused, "without precedent, in documented magical history." "Katya is 16, Volkov said. "She is of age to brand. The laws of Slavic magical tradition are not the only laws in this room, Dmitri, Apollon said, pleasantly, the way a knife is pleasant if it's pointing away from you. The girl is 8, Volkov said, swinging to look at Apollon. Your daughter is 8 years old and performed a branding. That is not a tradition, that is an accident of wild magic in an untrained child. Both events were accidents of wild magic, Sarkova said. Let's not pretend Katya's was any more controlled than Gabrielle's. Katya's jaw tightened. She stared at a point on the far wall. It doesn't matter, Volkov continued. The brand stands. The Durmstrang tradition recognizes, the Veela clans recognize, Apollon's representative began. Both of them spoke at once. Sarkova put her fingers to her temples. Harry looked across the room at Katya. She was still staring at the wall. He looked at Gabrielle. She was looking at him with an expression that was curious and calm and slightly proprietorial in the way that 8-year-olds occasionally are about things they don't fully understand. What does it actually do? Harry asked. Everyone stopped. He looked at Sarkova, because she seemed like the most likely person to give him a straight answer. The brand. What does it actually do to me? What does it mean? Sarkova looked at him for a moment, the look of someone recalibrating slightly. Brands they are ancient magical bonds. They connect the branded individual to the one who made the mark. In traditional Slavic magical practice, a brand is, she glanced at Volkov. In traditional practice, it creates a bond of protection and allegiance. The branded individual is under the protection of the brander's family. So it's like being owned, Harry said. The room went very quiet again. No, Katya said. Her voice was flat and definite, and it was the first time she'd spoken since sitting down. It's not ownership. She stopped. It's complicated. It's a bond, Apollon said, more gently. Not a chain. In Veela tradition, the brand represents a tether, a connection between two magical signatures. It means Gabrielle's magic recognizes yours. It reached for you. She's 8, Harry said. Yes, Apollon said. And you are 9. Magic does not care about age, I'm afraid. So what happens now? Harry asked. This question, apparently, was the one nobody wanted to answer, because it prompted a fresh wave of overlapping conversation between the adults that grew progressively less polished as it went on. Vernon had started saying something about suing someone. Petunia was making small distressed sounds. Volkov was talking about Durmstrang's rights of recognition. Apollon's representative was citing Veela clan law. Sarkova was trying to moderate everyone at once and losing ground rapidly. Harry listened to all of it for about 90 seconds, which was long enough to understand that nobody in this room was going to do anything useful, and then he got up off the ottoman and walked over to Katya. She looked at him warily as he sat down in the empty chair beside her. What's your name? He asked. Katya, she said. Then, grudgingly, Katya Krum. I'm Harry. Harry Potter. Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of recognition. Not the kind that came from fame, he'd realize later, but the kind that came from information. She'd been told about him, somehow, or she'd read about him. Something. I know, she said. You said it was an accident. That you didn't mean to. I didn't. But it happened anyway. Yes. Can it be undone? She looked at her hand. At the matching mark on her right palm. I don't know, she said honestly. I don't think so. The books say brands are permanent. The books, he repeated. You read about this. I study everything. She said it without apology. My school, Durmstrang, has records going back 500 years on branding traditions. I've read all of it. But none of it said anything about this. No, she said. Nothing like this. Across the room, Gabrielle had slipped off the sofa while her mother was occupied and padded across the carpet in small silent steps until she was standing in front of Harry. She looked at him with grave, enormous blue eyes. He looked back. "You're not scared," she said, exactly the same observation Katya had made. "People keep saying that," Harry said. "Most people are scared of brands," Gabrielle said. She had the considered air of a child who has heard adults discuss something at length and absorbed it thoroughly. Papa was scared when Maman told him what happened. He went very white. "Are you scared?" Harry asked her. She thought about it with visible seriousness. "No," she decided. "You feel like something that should have been there already." Katya made a small sound beside Harry that might have been a sharp exhale. Gabrielle looked at her across Harry without any apparent self-consciousness. "You feel like that too," Gabrielle told Katya. "Like something that should have been there." Katya stared at her. "You're 8 years old." "I know," Gabrielle said placidly. Harry looked between them. There was something between them that he couldn't name, not hostility, exactly, but the charged quality of two people who have just realized they're connected to the same thing and haven't decided how they feel about it yet. "My hands still burn," Harry said. "Is that normal?" "For a few hours," Katya said, still looking at Gabrielle. Then she looked at Harry. "You should eat something. Branding draws on the body as well as magic." "I had a bread roll." "That's not," she stopped. Something changed in her face, the controlled, defensive posture shifted just slightly. "I'll get you something proper," she said, and stood up and walked toward the table of food near the window before Harry could respond, moving through the argument still raging in the center of the room with the ease of someone accustomed to navigating spaces where adults were loudly wrong. Gabrielle sat down in the chair Katya had vacated, tucking her feet up under her. She was still watching Harry. "Are you from London?" she asked. "Sort of," Harry said. "I live with my aunt and uncle. In Surrey." "We live in France," Gabrielle said. "Near the sea." "Fleur, that's my sister, she says it's boring but I like it." She paused. "You'll probably come visit." "Will I?" "Probably," Gabrielle said, as if this were settled. "Because of the bond. Maman says bonds need tending or they go strange." "What does strange mean?" She considered. "I don't know exactly. But I think it means angry." She looked at his hands. "Does it hurt a lot?" "Not too bad," Harry said. She reached out and took his right hand in both of hers with absolute unself-consciousness, the way small children handle things they feel belong to them, and looked at the mark on his palm. Her fingers were warm and the burning eased slightly, which surprised him. "There," she said, satisfied, and continued holding his hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Katya came back with a plate of proper food and stopped short when she saw Gabrielle holding Harry's hand. She looked at them for a moment with an unreadable expression, then sat back down and put the plate on Harry's knee. "Eat," she said. Harry ate. The argument continued. The burning in his hands eased. The argument lasted 3 hours. By the end of it, Harry had eaten everything on the plate, learned to play a card game Gabrielle produced from her coat pocket that involved cards that bid if you played the wrong one, and listened to Katya explain, in precise, academic language that she kept simplifying without being asked, what a brand actually meant in the context of both Slavic magical tradition and Veela practice. In Slavic tradition, the brand was a mark of protection, a declaration that the brander's magical lineage stood as shield and ally to the one marked. It was usually done deliberately, usually between families, usually with a lot of ceremony. It was rare. It was serious. And it created an obligation, not on the marked person, but on the brander's family. Durmstrang's position, therefore, was that Katya had inadvertently placed the Krum family and, by extension, Durmstrang itself, in a position of obligation toward Harry Potter, and that this was an insult to Durmstrang's dignity unless properly recognized and formalized. In Veela tradition, the brand was something older and stranger. It was the Veela magic recognizing a resonant magical signature and reaching for it. It happened spontaneously, rarely, and when it did, the Veela clans treated it as significant. Sacred, even. Gabrielle's magic had reached for Harry's with the single-minded certainty of Veela instinct, and the clan's position was that this created a bond that was essentially inviolable. The problem, one of many problems, Harry gathered, was that both traditions were now staked on the same person, and both traditions had very different ideas about what that meant. "So Durmstrang thinks your family owes me something," Harry said, when Katya finished explaining. "In simplified terms," Katya said. "And the Veela clans think," he looked at Gabrielle. "You're bound to our magic," Gabrielle said, dealing another round of the biting card game. "Which means we're responsible for you. And you're," she searched for the word. "Ours." "I'm not anyone's," Harry said, with 9-year-old certainty. Gabrielle looked up from her cards. "Not like property," she said, with the patience of someone explaining something obvious. "Like family. Like someone who matters." Harry didn't say anything to that. He looked at his cards. One of them made a sound like a small hiss. "Don't play the red one," Katya said, glancing over. "I wasn't going to." "You were about to." He hadn't been, but he'd been considering it, which was close enough. He put down a different card. Gabrielle made a sound of protest. Across the room, the argument between Volkov, Apollon, and Sarkova had reached some kind of inflection point. Sarkova was speaking in a low, controlled voice that carried without being raised, and both Volkov and Apollon were listening, which suggested she'd found a formulation that neither of them could immediately object to. "The International Confederation will not adjudicate on the matter of traditional branding law," Sarkova was saying. "That is not our jurisdiction. However, the matter of the child's welfare is our jurisdiction. Until such time as these traditions can be formally reviewed, the brands will be recognized as extant by both parties without either party's claims to primacy being acknowledged. This is a provisional arrangement. It will be revisited." "When?" Volkov said, not asking. "When the boy is of age," Sarkova said. "He is 9. There is time. The Durmstrang tradition requires formal acknowledgement within. I know what it requires, Dmitri." "I said provisional." "You may note your objection." Volkov noted his objection with visible displeasure. Apollon said something in French to her representative that Harry didn't catch. Vernon Dursley, who had been silent for an impressive stretch, said loudly, "I don't understand any of this, but I want to be very clear that the boy, that Harry is absolutely nothing to do with any of this nonsense, and will be, Mr. Dursley," Sarkova said, turning to look at him with an expression of absolute patience that somehow conveyed its own form of steel. "The brands are on your nephew's hands. They are real, they are documented, and they are permanent. You may object to this circumstance as vigorously as you like. It will not change the circumstance." Vernon made the sound of a man whose bluster has just walked into a wall. Petunia looked at Harry from across the room. It was a complicated look, not soft, exactly, but layered in a way that Petunia's looks rarely were. Like she was seeing something she'd been trying not to see for 9 years and failing, finally, to keep not seeing it. Harry looked back at her steadily. Then he looked at his hands. The marks were faint now. You'd have to know they were there to find them. But they were there, permanent, real, exactly what they were. Something about that, about the realness of it, settled in his chest like a stone settling in water. Not unpleasant. Just true. They were given contact information before the evening was over, Katya's, by Volkov, who gave it with the expression of a man performing an obligation he resents, and Apollon Delacour's, by Apollon herself, who pressed a card into Harry's hand and said something in French that Gabrielle translated as, "Right. The bond needs tending." Gabrielle, for her part, gave Harry a small drawing she'd done during the argument. She'd produced a pencil from somewhere and drawn on the back of a menu card, a quick, loose sketch of 2 hands palm up, with marks on them. His hands. The marks were accurate. "You drew this just now?" Harry said. "I can see them," Gabrielle said, tapping the side of her head. "Up here. I can see your magic." She said it with the matter-of-factness of someone who has always been able to see things others can't and considers it entirely normal. "It's very gold. And it's very big." "You can see magic?" Katya said, looking at Gabrielle sharply. "Maman says it's a Veela thing," Gabrielle said. "Some of us can." She looked at Harry. "Your magic is the biggest I've ever seen. Even bigger than Maman's, and hers is the biggest usually." Katya and Harry looked at each other. "All right," Katya said, and it sounded like a decision made, not an offer extended. "I have questions about, there are things in the branding records I want to understand better. About dual brands. I'll research." "All right," Harry said. "I'll write too," Gabrielle announced. "You're 8, Katya said. "I know how to write letters," Gabrielle said, serenely. The manor began emptying after that. It was late, well past 11, and the event had apparently been derailed enough that people were drifting toward the exits with the slightly dazed air of guests who had attended something other than what was advertised. Volkov swept out with Katya in tow, one hand on her shoulder in the way of adults shepherding children they're simultaneously proud of and furious with. Apollon gathered Gabrielle with more grace, pausing to say something to Sarkova in low tones before they departed. Sarkova found Harry near the entrance, waiting while Vernon negotiated the return of their coats. "You handled that very well," she said. She was looking at him in that recalibrating way again, the way she'd looked at him when he'd asked his direct questions. "For 9 years old." "I just asked questions," Harry said. "Yes." She paused. "The brands will draw attention as you get older. People will have opinions about what they mean, what they require of you, what they entitle them to. You understand that?" "I think so." "The traditions say different things," Sarkova said carefully. "But the traditions are not your obligation. The bond, the actual magical connection, separate from what anyone's cultural laws say about it, that is something else." She looked at his hands. "In 30 years of working with the Confederation, I have never seen 2 brands on one person. I have never heard of it outside of myth." She looked up at him. "I don't know what it means. I want you to know that I don't know, and anyone who tells you they do is probably trying to use it for their own purposes." "I know," Harry said. She studied him. "Yes," she said. "I think you do." She reached into her robes and produced a card. "If you ever need, if anyone pressures you about this, write to me directly. Not to the Confederation. To me." Harry took the card. He put it in his pocket next to Apollon's card and Gabrielle's drawing. Vernon appeared with the coats and herded Harry toward the door with the efficiency of a man who has spent an entire evening being made uncomfortable and wants to go home. Harry went. He looked back once at the entrance hall, at the warm, humming, magical space of the manor, at the floating lights still drifting in their slow patterns overhead. His hands burned softly, both of them, steady as a heartbeat. He thought about Katya's eyes, dark and direct, the look of someone who didn't flinch from things. He thought about Gabrielle's matter-of-fact certainty that he'd been there already, in some form, before tonight. He thought about what Sarkova had said. The traditions are not your obligation. Harry stepped out into the cooling summer night and thought, right. Good. That's what I thought. Vernon's car was parked at the end of the drive. The lanterns in the garden were beginning to dim as the evening wound down. Somewhere across London, 2 girls were going back to wherever they came from, and both of them had a mark on their hand that matched the marks on his. He pressed his palms together, feeling the faint warmth of the brands against each other. Not a leash, Katya had said. Not ownership. He believed her. He didn't know why yet, but he believed her. The drive back to Surrey was silent and strange. Vernon didn't say anything about what had happened, which was itself unusual. Petunia watched the dark road out the passenger window with that same complicated expression. Dudley had fallen asleep in the back with éclair residue on his face. Harry sat with his hands in his lap and watched the streetlights go past, each one painting a brief gold arc across his palms, and thought about myths. About bonds. About the look on Gabrielle's face when she'd said you feel like something that should have been there already. He thought about how, for most of his 9 years, he'd felt like something that shouldn't be there at all. Surplus. Extra. The space in the Dursley house where a person was inconveniently present. He looked at the mark on his right hand, the curved Veela sigil, almost invisible now in the dark car. He looked at the geometric mark on his left, Katia's, precise and architectural. 2 people who had reached for him tonight, even by accident, even without meaning to. 2 people whose magic had looked at his and done something about it. The streetlights kept going past. For the first time in his life, Harry Potter felt less like a surplus. He felt like something someone had marked as mattering. That was enough. For tonight, that was enough. He closed his hands and went to sleep. Chapter 2, The weight of Mark's 3 years is a long time when you're 9. By the time Harry was 12, the summer at Cavendish Court had the quality of a dream he'd had so many times it had become its own kind of memory, vivid in some places, worn smooth in others, but always present. Always there when he pressed his palms together in the dark. The marks had never faded completely. In certain light, morning light, mostly, or the low orange light just before sunset, you could see them clearly. The geometric lines on his left palm, the curved Veela sigil on his right. Most of the time they were invisible unless you were looking for them, but they were always warm. Slightly warmer than the surrounding skin. Always. Dudley had noticed once, early on, and made the mistake of grabbing Harry's wrist to look more closely. The burn had not been pleasant for either of them. Harry had felt a surge of something hot and protective radiate up his arm, and Dudley had dropped his wrist like he'd touched a stove and never mentioned it again. Neither had Harry. It was one of many things they all pretended wasn't happening in the house at Privet Drive. The letters had started arriving 6 weeks after Cavendish Court, and they hadn't stopped. Katia wrote the way she apparently did everything, precisely, methodically, with citations. Her first letter had been 3 pages, the opening paragraph a terse acknowledgement that she had spoken to her brother Viktor about the situation. He is angry. I told him his anger is not relevant. He disagreed. We are currently not speaking, followed by 12 dense paragraphs of research notes on dual branding in historical Slavic magical records. Harry had read it 3 times. He'd written back asking 4 questions about the magical mechanics and 1 question about Viktor. Katia had answered all 4 magical questions in exhaustive detail. On the Viktor question she'd written, simply, he will come around. He always does. The letters had continued every 2 weeks after that, regular as clockwork, the handwriting getting no warmer but the content gradually, incrementally, revealing more. She sent him books twice, smuggled in parcels wrapped in brown paper, charmed against magical detection at customs, because Durmstrang students were not supposed to correspond with non-Durmstrang students, and what Katia was not supposed to do she apparently did with considerable efficiency. The books were dense. Dense and fascinating and written in a mixture of English and German with occasional sentences in Russian that Katia had apparently decided he should simply figure out. He did. It took him a week the first time and 3 days the second time, and by the 3rd book he was reading the Russian passages before the English ones and enjoying the slight feeling of being ahead of wherever she thought he was. He wrote and told her that. She'd written back, "Good. You were taking too long." Gabrielle's letters were entirely different. They arrived irregularly, sometimes 3 in a week and then nothing for a month, and they were a mixture of English, French, and occasionally something that Harry eventually identified as Old Occitan, a language, Gabrielle apparently felt, that was more suited to certain things she wanted to say. The letters were also illustrated. Every single one. In the margins, down the sides, sometimes taking up a full page, detailed drawings of whatever Gabrielle was thinking about, rendered with a precision that was startling in an 8-year-old and increasingly startling as she got older. She drew Harry. She'd never seen him clearly, it had been dark and chaotic and she'd been held by her mother for most of it, but she drew him anyway, from whatever she'd seen of him and, he suspected, from whatever she could see of his magic in the bond. The drawings were slightly off in the specifics, his hair, his scar, which she'd draw wrong for 2 years before he finally described it in a letter, but the essence of them, the quality of aliveness in them, was accurate in a way that unsettled him pleasantly. She drew the brands too. Over and over, from different angles, in different combinations, in the margins of letters about her school lessons and the sea near their house and the argument she'd had with Fleur about whether Gabrielle was old enough to attend the Beauxbatons autumn formal. She drew them like she was solving a problem, like each drawing was an experiment, testing a theory about what the marks meant, what they were made of, what they were doing. "You should show these to someone," Harry had written, when she sent him a drawing of the dual brands overlaid on each other that looked less like a sketch and more like a magical diagram. "Who?" she'd written back. "A professor. Someone who knows about magical theory." Maman showed Professor Beaumont. He said it was impressive for my age and then didn't say anything useful. The drawings know more than he does. Harry had looked at the diagram for a long time. He couldn't follow all of it, he didn't have the magical education to read what she was showing him, but something about the way the two patterns overlapped felt right. Like it was describing something real. He'd sent the diagram to Katya. Katya's response had taken 2 weeks, which was unusual. When it came, it was 12 pages, and the opening line was, "Where did you get this? Who drew this?" He'd written back, "Gabrielle Delacour. She's 9. The next response had taken 3 days and was 4 pages of dense magical theory ending with, "The girl is drawing the resonance pattern. The way the two brands interact at the source. This is not amateur work. This is not something you could simply observe. She is either extrapolating from the bond itself or she has some form of direct magical sight I have never heard of in a child this young. She says she can see magic," Harry had written. "She told us the night it happened. I know. I didn't believe it then. I believe it now." The first time Harry's magic did something he couldn't explain away as coincidence, he was 10 and a half and it was a Tuesday in November, which felt like an appropriate sort of day for it. He'd been in the back garden at Privet Drive, working on the list of chores Vernon had left him, specifically the task of pulling up the old rose bushes that had died over the summer. It was cold. His hands were bare because he'd forgotten his gloves and he hadn't wanted to go back in and risk encountering Vernon, who'd been in a mood since Monday. He was tired and cold and the roots were deep and stubborn, and when the largest one refused to come loose for the 4th time in a row, something in Harry's chest went tight and hot and he pulled, and every rose bush in the garden came out of the ground simultaneously. All 12 of them. Roots and all. They rose about 2 feet into the air and then dropped back down with a series of heavy, dirt-scattering thumps. Harry stood in the middle of them and felt the heat in his chest settle back to its normal level. He looked at his hands. The marks were visible, both of them, glowing faintly gold in the gray November light. He flexed his fingers. The marks faded back to their invisible state. He looked at the rose bushes, all uprooted, all arranged in the rough circular pattern they'd been in when they were planted, just lying on the ground like someone had pressed pause on the concept of gardening. "Huh," Harry said. "Right." He wrote to Katya that evening. "Something happened with the magic today. I wasn't trying to do anything. I just got frustrated and everything in the garden moved at once. Is that the brand?" Her response arrived in 2 days. Probably not the brand specifically. More likely the brand's effect on your underlying magic. Based on everything I've read, and I want to be clear that I am working from very limited precedent here, the dual branding isn't creating new magic in you. It's amplifying what's there. Your magical core is already significant. The brands act like, picture a lens. They focus what's already there. Make it sharper. More responsive. When Gabrielle said your magic was large, she wasn't being complimentary. She was being accurate. You have more raw power than most adult wizards I've met. You're 12 in what, 2 months? You shouldn't be moving gardens without a wand. You shouldn't be moving anything without a wand at your age. Don't let anyone tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing. But do be careful. The magic responds to emotion, and emotion is not always your friend when power is involved. He'd written back, you sound like you're worried. She'd written, I'm concerned. Worry is for people who don't have better options. I'm researching. He'd smiled at that in the way he smiled at most of Katia's letters, which was privately and without her ever knowing about it. The garden incident turned out to be the opening of something, not a single event. After that, things happened with a comfortable regularity that Harry stopped being surprised by and started treating as data points. He couldn't do magic intentionally, not yet, not without a wand and formal training, which he didn't have, but his magic had apparently decided that 12 was old enough to stop waiting for permission. Locks opened when he was frustrated. Wind shifted when he was cold. Once, when a dog from 3 houses down cornered him against a fence and got its teeth into his sleeve, the animal had simply stopped. It had gone still and looked at him with confused eyes and then sat down carefully and refused to chase him anymore. Harry had walked away at a measured pace and felt the warmth in his hands all the way home. He catalogued all of it in a notebook and sent Katia summaries. She sent back analyses. It became its own kind of collaboration, her sitting in Durmstrang's library with centuries of records and a methodical mind, him in Privet Drive with no books and no training and apparently more raw magical force than anyone had bothered to plan for. Gabrielle, when he described the incidents to her, drew pictures of them. The garden one became a full-page illustration, 12 rose bushes floating in mid-air, done in that distinctive style of hers where the accurate and the slightly dreamlike existed in the same composition. She sent it with a note that said, you should ask them to teach you properly. This kind of thing needs direction or it will go in the wrong direction. She was 10. She said things like that with the absolute serenity of someone who has been correct about most things for long enough that she no longer considers the possibility of being wrong. She wasn't wrong. Harry had his Hogwarts letter in July, and the summer that followed was a different kind of strange. The Dursleys responded to the letter the way they responded to most evidence of magic, with escalating denial that eventually collapsed into resigned dysfunction. Vernon threw the first letter. Harry caught the second out of the air before Vernon could get to it, which made Vernon go a very particular shade of red that Harry had catalogued as incident red, reserved for moments when Harry did something that couldn't be explained or controlled. You are not going, Vernon said. I am, though, Harry said. He'd learned, over 3 years of letters and research notes and Katia's precision and Gabrielle's certainty, that he wasn't actually obligated to perform uncertainty. He wasn't unsure about this. He wasn't afraid of Vernon. He hadn't been afraid of Vernon for a while, if he was being honest with himself, and the magic warming his palms made it very difficult to sustain the pretense of it. Vernon took a step toward him and stopped. Whether it was something in Harry's face or something in the air between them, he stopped, and they looked at each other for a long moment, and then Vernon said something about the guest room and the locks, and Harry said, if you lock me in the guest room, I'll get out. You know I'll get out. And they had an agreement after that, which wasn't anything so formal as a truce but functioned like one. He wrote to Katia about Hogwarts. She wrote back a list of texts he should obtain before term started, annotated with her assessments of which professors he'd find most interesting and which he'd find most frustrating, which she prefaced with, Durmstrang has no correspondence with Hogwarts officially. This is based on Viktor's assessment, which I have filtered for his considerable biases. He wrote to Gabrielle, who wrote back a drawing of a large castle with owls circling it and a small figure standing at the gates that was clearly meant to be him, and a note that said, send me pictures. I want to see if I drew it right. She'd drawn it approximately right. She always did. The last letter before term started came from a name he didn't recognize, not Katia's handwriting, not Gabrielle's distinctive mixture of script and illustration. This one was in thick black ink on heavy cream paper, the penmanship that of someone who'd been taught calligraphy and taken it seriously. Harry Potter, my name is Viktor Krum. You know of me through my sister, who I am told has been in regular correspondence with you for 3 years, which I learned approximately 1 month ago and have spent that month considering my feelings about. I am writing because I have decided that my feelings, whatever they are less important than the practical situation. Katia explained to me what happened at the English gathering when you were 9. I was angry when she first told me, and I am being honest about this because Katia says you respond better to honesty than to diplomacy, because the brand involves my family's name and my family's obligation and I was not consulted. I have since been told, by Katia, that my being angry about something I had no power to prevent or alter is unproductive. She used more words than that. The point was the same. You are entering Hogwarts this year. You are beginning your formal education, which means you will begin to understand what you are capable of. I have spoken to Katia about what she has observed in your correspondence. I have also spoken to, through channels I will not detail here, people who have knowledge of dual branding events. There are people who will want to use the brand to control or influence you. There are people at Durmstrang, I am not speaking of Katia, who see the bond as a political asset. I want you to know that I do not share this view. I am Katia's brother. What involves her involves me. I am not your enemy. I am also not going to pretend to be your ally until I have met you. That would be dishonest. Write back if you want. Don't if you don't. Either way, stay sharp. Viktor Krum. Harry read it twice. Then he looked at the date. It had been sent from Durmstrang, 5 days ago. He picked up his pen. Viktor, I appreciate the honesty. Katia said you'd come around. She was right. You said people at Durmstrang want to use the brand as a political asset. I want to know who, specifically. Not because I'm worried, but because I'd like to know who I'm dealing with. Harry. He sent it off with the school owl he'd borrowed for the summer and went back to packing his trunk. Hogwarts was everything the drawing in Gabrielle's letter had suggested and considerably more besides. Harry arrived on the 1st of September with his trunk, his owl Hedwig, and the comfortable certainty that he knew more about the world than anyone at King's Cross was expecting him to, and he walked through the barrier at platform 9 3/4 and immediately felt the background hum of a large magical structure's enchantments vibrating against his palms. Not unpleasant. Just present. Like the manor at Cavendish Court, but older, denser, more layered. He boarded the train and found a compartment and was joined, in the way of first-year journeys, by a red-haired boy named Ron Weasley who offered him half a pie and asked immediately about his scar. Harry answered the question he'd been asked, yes, it was from Voldemort, yes, he couldn't remember it, and then redirected to something more interesting, which was the charms textbook Ron had open on his lap. You've read it already? Ron looked surprised. Most of it. He'd read all of it, and 4 others Katia had recommended, but most of it seemed like the right starting point. My brothers said you weren't supposed to bother until term started, Ron said, in a tone that suggested he'd taken this advice to heart. Your brothers were wrong, Harry said, pleasantly. Ron considered this. Yeah, probably, he agreed, and offered Harry a chocolate frog. They got on fine after that. The sorting took him by surprise only in the sense that the hat took longer than he'd expected, nearly 4 minutes, which he later heard called a hat stall. He sat on the stool and felt the hat settle over his eyes and heard a voice in his head that was dry and amused and considerably more perceptive than he'd anticipated. Interesting, it said. Very, very interesting. You've been doing some reading, I see. And these marks, it seemed to pause in a way hats shouldn't be able to pause. I've sorted thousands of students, young man. I've never sorted anyone with 2 brands. I know, Harry thought back. You're not frightened of me. Should I be? No, the hat said. But most students are, at least a little. You've got the courage for Gryffindor, certainly. The intelligence for Ravenclaw. The ambition, yes, it's there, you just don't perform it. Slytherin would be interesting. But I think you know where you belong. Do I? Gryffindor. The hat announced to the Great Hall, and Harry took it off his head and handed it back to Professor McGonagall, who was looking at him with a slight additional intensity he filed away for later. He sat down at the Gryffindor table and found Ron had been sorted there too, 2 minutes earlier, and was waving him over with the enthusiasm of someone claiming territory. Harry sat down and helped himself to the treacle tart and thought about the hat's pause when it had encountered the brands. The slight hitch in its otherwise smooth deliberation. I've sorted thousands of students. I've never sorted anyone with 2 brands. He pressed his left palm flat on the table, feeling the warmth there. Under the noise of the sorting feast, the distant vibration of Hogwarts enchantments, the chatter and laughter of several hundred students, the warmth in his hands was quiet and constant in his. 2 days into term, a letter arrived from Katia. How's Hogwarts? He wrote back, loud. Large. The magic in the building is extraordinary. Transfiguration looks interesting. Tell me what you know about Professor Quirrell. Her response came in 3 days, why Quirrell specifically? He wrote, he smells wrong. I can't explain it better than that. There's something, he stopped. Crossed it out. Tried again. When I walked past him in the corridor yesterday, my right hand burned. Not the normal warmth. Something sharper. Like a warning. Her response came in 1 day, which was unprecedented, don't go near him alone. Don't draw his attention. The burning in your right palm is Gabrielle's brand. The Veela sigil responds to threat before the conscious mind registers it, it's a protective instinct built into the mark. If her brand is warning you, there is something genuinely wrong with that man. I'm serious, Harry. Don't be reckless about this. He looked at the letter for a moment. Then he wrote back, I'm not going to hide from a defense professor. But I'll be careful. He could imagine, very clearly, her expression when she read that. The next letter arrived the following morning with the single line, you are going to give me a headache. He grinned at it across the breakfast table. Ron, who was eating his weight in kippers, looked over. Who's that from? A friend. The same one who sends you all those books? Different one. He folded the letter and put it in his pocket. She worries. She? Ron's eyebrows went up in a very particular way. It's not, Harry started, and then stopped, because it was complicated in ways that would take longer to explain than he had patience for over breakfast. It's complicated, he said instead. Right, Ron said, in the tone of someone who has decided something while pretending not to. The thing about Hogwarts that surprised him most was the casual way people talked about his name. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the scar, the night on Godric's Hollow, all of it passed through conversations around him like weather. Students who'd grown up in the magical world had grown up with the story. He was already a story to most of them before they'd met him. He found it more curious than irritating, mostly. It told him a lot about people, who wanted to know him and who wanted to know the story. Ron, he discovered, was categorically interested in Harry rather than the story. Hermione Granger, who was in his house and who had an academic intensity that made Katia's research notes look casual, was interested in both but managed to be interested in them separately, which Harry respected. He found the lessons easy in a way that probably said something about 3 years of reading Katia's books, and the magic came readily in a way that said something else again. In their first charms lesson, when Professor Flitwick had them attempt a basic Wingardium Leviosa, Harry managed the spell on the second attempt with a control that made Flitwick go very still and then make a note in a small book he produced from his pocket. Excellent, Mr. Potter. Very good indeed. He said the same thing to several other students, but the note in the book was specific to Harry, and Harry noticed. After class, Flitwick asked him to stay behind. "Your magical control is quite developed for a first year," Flitwick said, in his mild, precise way. "Have you had prior instruction?" "No formal instruction," Harry said honestly. "I've done a lot of reading." Flitwick looked at him. "May I?" He gestured toward Harry's hand. Harry held out his left hand, palm up. The geometric mark was visible in the classroom's late afternoon light, just barely, but it was there. Flitwick's expression shifted in a way that was carefully neutral. "I see," he said. "Do you know what they are?" Harry asked. "I'm familiar with the theory of branding, yes." Flitwick was quiet for a moment. "Both marks, on the same person. That is, you'll have questions, Mr. Potter, as you progress through your studies, about why your magic responds the way it does. Come to me when you have those questions. I'd rather you got accurate information." "Thank you," Harry said. He meant it. Walking out of the classroom, he felt the marks warm slightly, steadily, the way they did when something good had happened. He thought of Gabrielle's diagram, the overlapping resonance pattern she'd drawn at 10 years old. The way the two brands interacted at the source. He'd written to her after his first week at Hogwarts. She'd written back with a letter that was 50% drawing, the Great Hall, the Ollery, the grounds near the lake, all rendered with that slightly off accuracy that she always managed, and a section of text that said, "Fleur says Beauxbatons is better than Hogwarts because we have better food." I said, "That's not how you measure a school." She said, "I'm too young to have opinions about how you measure schools." I said, "If I'm old enough to have a bond, I'm old enough to have opinions." She didn't have an answer for that. "How does the castle feel?" "I can feel you've arrived somewhere old. Something settled in the bond, like you found where you were supposed to go." Harry had read that last line several times. "The castle feels like it was waiting for something," he'd written back. "Maybe me, maybe someone else. It's old and large and full of magic in the walls. You drew it almost exactly right, by the way." She'd written back 3 days later with a new drawing, just his hands, both of them, palms up, the marks visible and glowing, and below it a single line in French that he'd had to ask one of the older Gryffindor girls to translate for him. "We feel you there." He'd folded that one carefully and kept it in the textbook he used most. By December, he knew 3 things with certainty. The first, Quirrell was dangerous, and whatever was wrong with him was connected to something Harry's magic had been tracking since September without him fully understanding it. His scar had started aching near the man. His right palm burned whenever Quirrell was within 20 feet of him. Something in the castle's lower levels was being guarded, and whatever it was, Quirrell wanted it. The second, he was significantly more powerful than anyone at Hogwarts had planned for. Not performing for attention powerful, not trying to show off powerful. Just genuinely, naturally more responsive to magic than anyone in his year and most people in the years above him, and the brands were, as Katya had said, functioning as a lens. Focusing what was already there. Making it precise. The third, Katya had been right that the marks would draw attention, and the attention was already starting. Professor Snape had been watching him since the first potions lesson with an interest that felt more like inventory than education. Quirrell avoided looking at him in a way that was itself a kind of looking. And there were people beyond Hogwarts. Katya's letters over the past month had grown more careful, more coded in places, who were watching the situation with the bond. He was 12 years old and he was in the middle of something that had been building since before he was born, and the marks on his hands were warm and steady in his. He sat in the Gryffindor common room on the last evening before Christmas holidays, Hedwig asleep on the back of his chair, the fire making everything amber, and reread a letter from Katya. "I've found something in the Durmstrang records. Something about dual brands. There's a case, 600 years ago, one documented event. I'm still translating the source material, but the implication is significant. The dual bond doesn't just amplify magic at the individual level. It creates a triad resonance, the two branders and the branded become a closed magical circuit. What affects one, the others feel. What strengthens one, strengthens the others. This means if someone wants to use the bond against you, they have to go through both of us. I wanted you to know that. Before you go into whatever you're clearly walking toward at Hogwarts, because I can tell from your letters that you're walking towards something and you're not going to stop. You're not alone in this. That's what I wanted to say. He pressed his left palm flat on the arm of the chair. The mark warmed under his skin, clear as a heartbeat. He picked up his pen. I know, he wrote. Thank you. Then he added, tell me everything about the 600-year-old case. Every word. He could imagine, very clearly, her expression when she read that too. The slight movement at the corner of her mouth that wasn't quite a smile. He sent the letter and watched the fire and felt both his hands warm in the amber light of the common room, steady and present in his. Outside, snow was beginning to fall over Hogwarts. The castle hummed in its old, deep way. Harry Potter leaned back in his chair and thought about triad resonance, and dual bonds, and dangerous defense professors, and a girl in Bulgaria who researched things the way other people breathed, and a girl in France who drew the future before it happened. He thought, I'm not alone in this. He thought, no. I'm not. The fire crackled. Hedwig stirred in her sleep. The snow kept falling. Chapter 3, Durmstrang's Demand. The Goblet of Fire arrived at Hogwarts on a Thursday. Harry was 13 now, nearly 14, and the summer before fourth year had been the kind of summer where everything felt like it was building towards something without being polite enough to say what. The World Cup had happened. He'd been there with the Weasleys, which had been extraordinary right up until the point where the Death Eaters had marched through the campsite and someone had fired the dark mark into the sky, and the world had gone from celebration to chaos in the space of about 20 minutes. He'd ridden to Katia from the campsite, before the Ministry had sorted anything out. Short, terse, Viktor played brilliantly. Chaos afterward. Tell me what you know about the mark being used publicly after 13 years. Her response had arrived the next morning. I know what you know and I don't like what it implies. Keep your eyes open this year. Something is building. Below that, in different ink, like she'd added it later, Viktor is asking about you. He wants to know you're all right. He won't write himself, too proud, but he is asking. He'd written back, tell him I'm fine. Tell him his diving was better than his seeker work at the Cup suggests and he knows it. He'd gotten a letter from Viktor 3 days later that was almost entirely about Quidditch technique and ended with, Katia said to tell you to eat properly. I was not asked to include this but she insisted. Harry had grinned at that for about a minute. The announcement of the Triwizard Tournament had made Hogwarts feel like a shaken snow globe, everyone glittering and disoriented and excited, the noise level in every common room and corridor elevated by approximately 20%. Harry had watched it with the patient interest of someone who suspected the snow globe was about to be shaken harder. He was right. The Goblet of Fire stood in the entrance hall, this enormous ancient cup that radiated magic in waves you could feel against your skin from 20 feet away. Students from Beauxbatons and Durmstrang were arriving the following week. The age line, Dumbledore's line of golden enchantment around the goblet's base, meant that only students of 17 or above could enter. Harry was 13. This was not his tournament. He watched the older students discuss it and made no move toward the goblet and thought about what Katia had said in her most recent letter. I need to tell you something before we arrive. There is a faction at Durmstrang, Karkaroff's people, specifically, who have been discussing the bond situation with increasing intensity this year. I don't know exactly what they're planning. But they are planning something. Karkaroff has been in correspondence with people whose names I recognize from the political wing of the Slavic Magical Council, and those people have been pushing the Durmstrang brand issue for 2 years. I will be in the delegation. Viktor will be in the delegation. Be careful what you say in front of Karkaroff. He is not your friend. I'll find you when we arrive. She had underlined that last part. The Durmstrang ship rose from the lake on a grey October morning while Harry was walking back from care of magical creatures with mud on his boots and a blast-ended scrut burn on his left forearm, and he stopped on the bank and watched it come up out of the dark water with the unhurried majesty of something that had been doing this for centuries and saw no reason to rush. It was genuinely impressive. Enormous, red-sailed, masted in a way that made it look more like a weapon than a vessel. The students who filed down the gangplank were dressed in furs, moving in tight formation, with the organized physical confidence of people who trained the way soldiers trained. Harry's left palm warmed. He pressed it against his side and waited. Viktor Krum came down the gangplank near the middle of the group. In person, he was everything the Quidditch card suggested and slightly more, tall, broad, dark-eyed, with a slightly hunched posture that Harry had come to understand, from Katya's occasional observations, was deliberate self-effacement. Viktor Krum in a room felt like a large thing making itself smaller on purpose. Behind Viktor, near the back of the group, moving with a controlled pace that was neither rushing nor dawdling, Katya. 3 years of letters. He'd never actually seen her since Cavendish Court, when they'd both been so young and the world had been going sideways around them. He'd known her in handwriting, in the precise structure of her arguments, in the annotated margins of smuggled books. She was taller than he'd calculated from the letter voice. 17 now. Dark hair pulled back in the same severe way he remembered from that night, which he suspected was default rather than style. She was scanning the crowd on the bank with the methodical attention of someone looking for something specific. She found him. The look on her face when she did was not quite a smile, it was something more contained than that, a slight shift in the set of her jaw, a fractional easing of the controlled line between her brows. But the recognition in it was complete and immediate, the look of someone seeing a person they know very well for the first time in 3 years. Harry raised his left hand slightly. She looked at her own right hand. Then back at him. The almost smile deepened very slightly. Then Karkaroff swept down the gangplank behind the students, and Harry got his first look at the Durmstrang headmaster. He was tall, grey-bearded, with the kind of theatrical presence that came from years of performing authority. He surveyed the gathered Hogwarts students and the grounds with an expression that managed to convey both contempt and calculation in the same glance. His eyes moved across the crowd efficiently, the way a man's eyes move when he's looking for something specific in a room. They found Harry. There it was, the fraction of a second that held too much. Recognition, assessment, something that resolved into a careful blankness that was itself a tell. Harry met his gaze steadily and looked away first only because he chose to, not because Karkaroff's stare was anything he needed to retreat from. He walked back up toward the castle. His left palm was warm the whole way. Katya found him that evening in the library. She came in with a Durmstrang textbook under her arm and sat down across from him at the table where he was working through an arithmancy problem set, and for a moment they both just looked at each other in the way of people who know each other through writing and are now recalibrating in 3 dimensions. "You're taller," she said. "You're the same height," he said. "I stopped growing at 15. She set her book down. "Your hair is worse than I imagined." "Thanks. Your handwriting is exactly as aggressive as I imagined." Something in her expression moved in that ghost of a smile way. She looked at his hands on the table, then at her own right hand, and the marks were visible on both of them in the library's lamplight, his left, her right, the same geometric pattern. "The resonance has strengthened," she said, turning her hand slightly. "I can feel the bond more clearly than I could last year." Gabrielle said the same thing. He lowered his voice. "She said it's been getting stronger since the summer. Since the dark mark." Katya looked up sharply. She connected those? She drew it. The bond responding to external threat, she did one of her diagrams. He pulled it from the back of his arithmancy notebook where he'd been keeping it for 3 weeks, waiting to show her in person. It was a full page, dense with overlapping curves and the annotated sigil patterns Gabrielle had been developing for 4 years, with the Veela sun symbol in the center and what appeared to be a threat-response notation in Old Occitan around the edges. Katya studied it for a long moment without speaking. "She's 13, Harry said. "I know how old she is." Katya turned the page slightly. "She's drawn the Bond's threat-response mechanism with more accuracy than the Durmstrang archives. This is, Harry." She almost never used his first name in writing. Something about hearing it in her voice, direct and flat and unadorned, landed differently. "This girl is doing original magical theory. I know. She needs a proper teacher. She knows that too. She can't find one who can keep up." He took the diagram back. "Katya. Tell me about Karkaroff." She straightened. "Eat something. You haven't had dinner." "I had a pie on the way here." "That's not," she stopped. Pinched the bridge of her nose briefly. "You sound like your letters. You sound like yours." A brief silence that had the quality of two people who are more comfortable than they're used to being with each other. She reached into her bag and produced an apple and put it on the table in front of him with the efficiency of someone executing a task. He ate the apple. She talked. "Karkaroff has been building a case for 2 years with the Slavic Magical Council. His argument is that the brand event at Cavendish Court created an outstanding obligation, that the Krum family's brand on you represents Durmstrang's claim of oversight over your magical development, and that Hogwarts has been interfering with that claim by providing your education without Durmstrang's formal acknowledgement." "That's insane," Harry said. "The brand is Krum family business, not school business." "I know. Viktor knows. But Karkaroff has found a reading of branding law that technically routes family obligation through institutional recognition in cases where it's complicated and it's deliberately complicated. He found an obscure precedent." "So what does he want?" Katya looked at him steadily. "He wants you at Durmstrang. Formally, on their books, under their oversight. He's been trying to find a mechanism to compel a transfer. The tournament is, I think it's his best opportunity. International magical law regarding tournament participants has provisions for Katya." Harry set down the apple core. "Someone put my name in the goblet. I'm underage. I can't have entered myself." She went still. "Dumbledore announced it tonight at dinner. 4 champions. Cedric Diggory for Hogwarts. Someone from Beaux Batons, I haven't found out who yet. Viktor for Durmstrang." He looked at her. "And me. The goblet produced my name as a 4th champion from a 4th school that doesn't exist." The silence stretched for 3 full seconds. "Karkaroff," she said. "That's my thinking. He submitted your name. To force you into the tournament under the rules of magical binding contract." Her voice was controlled, but something underneath it was not controlled at all. "So that you'd be on the record as a Durmstrang-associated participant because the brand gives his lawyers the argument that I'm Durmstrang-affiliated by magical obligation." Harry nodded. "I figured out most of it. I wanted you to confirm the legal pathway." "It won't hold," Katya said. "The argument is specious. Any competent magical lawyer would tear it apart in 20 minutes. Legal arguments don't have to be right to be disruptive." Harry leaned back. "He doesn't need to win the case. He needs to create enough of a question that the Confederation will take it seriously. And while they're taking it seriously, I'm bound by the tournament contract regardless." Katya stood up. She didn't say anything for a moment, just stood with her hands flat on the table, and Harry could see her working through it the way she worked through the hard problems in her letters, systematically, without panic, but with a focused intensity that was its own kind of urgency. "I need to write to Sarkova," she said. "Tonight." "I already did," Harry said. "Yesterday, as soon as Dumbledore made the announcement. I used the name she gave me, direct, not through the Confederation. I told her what I thought the mechanism was and asked her to pull whatever filings Karkaroff's people have made with the Council in the past 2 years. Katya looked at him. That full second pause. You're 13. I know. You thought of all this in 24 hours. I thought of most of it in the first 20 minutes. He shrugged. Sarkova told me, the night at Cavendish Court, that people would try to use the bond as a political tool. I've been thinking about what that would look like for 3 years. She sat back down. She was looking at him with something that was moving toward reassessment, not surprised, exactly, but recalibrating in real time, the way she'd been recalibrating since she sat down. Viktor doesn't know Karkaroff did this, she said. He knows something is happening but he doesn't know the specifics. You should tell him. He should know what his headmaster is doing with his family's name. It will go badly, she said. It'll go worse if it comes out another way and Viktor finds out you knew. She looked at him for a moment. Then, you're right. She said it the way she wrote it, directly, without cushioning, the simple acknowledgement of someone for whom being right was the standard and being wrong was a data point to correct. I'll tell him tonight. How is he going to take it? Badly. She picked up her book. Viktor's anger runs hot and then clears. He'll be furious at Karkaroff, furious at me for not telling him sooner, furious at the situation. Then he'll be useful. She paused. He already half suspected. He told me last week that Karkaroff has been acting differently since we left port. More satisfied. More satisfied, Harry repeated. Right. She moved to leave, then stopped. Turned back. The Beauxbatons delegation arrives tomorrow, she said, carefully neutral. Harry looked at her. I know. Gabrielle will be with them. Still carefully neutral. She's 13, Katya. She's not in the delegation officially. Her sister is the Beauxbatons champion. Katya was watching his face with the focused attention she brought to everything. Fleur Delacour. She submitted her name and was selected. Which means the Delacour family will be here for the duration of the tournament. Harry was quiet for a moment. He thought about the letter he'd gotten from Gabrielle in September, her excited sprawling handwriting, the drawing of Fleur that made her sister look approximately twice as imposing as a human being should, the postscript that had said, if Fleur gets selected I might come along. Don't tell her I said that. She'll use it to feel important. She's coming, Harry said. Probably, Katya said. Apollon Delacour will see to it. She paused. I thought you should know. Before tomorrow. So you're not, I thought you should know. He looked at her. There was something in the way she'd said it, the slight excess of care and the careful neutrality, that said something she wasn't saying. Thank you, he said. She nodded once. Walked out. Harry sat for a moment in the now quiet library, the lamp making a warm circle on the table, the arithmancy problem set still unsolved. He pressed both palms flat on the table. Both marks warm. Both present. He thought about Karkaroff's eyes finding him on the bank. The calculation in them. He thought about being entered in a tournament by someone else's ambition, bound by a contract he hadn't signed, expected to perform confusion and helplessness and the grateful disorientation of a boy who doesn't know what's happening. He picked up his arithmancy set and finished it in an hour and went to bed, and if his sleep was lighter than usual, it was only because his mind was running clean and fast on the problem, the way it always did when something interesting was building. The Beauxbatons carriage arrived the next afternoon, a powder blue flying carriage the size of a house, drawn by a dozen Palomino horses that Harry watched with genuine admiration because they were plainly extraordinary animals, and it landed on the grounds with a flourish that was objectively theatrical but earned it. The Beauxbatons students who emerged had the particular quality of people trained in a school with very high standards for presentation. Graceful, composed, moving in the way of people who'd had deportment incorporated into their magical education. Fleur Delacour was near the front of the group, tall, silver-blonde, with the full Veela heritage visible in every line of her, the kind of luminous that made the air around her seem lit from within. Harry noticed Fleur. Everyone noticed Fleur. Then Harry looked past her. Gabrielle was near the back of the Beauxbatons group, standing with two older students who were presumably Minders, and she was not looking at the castle or the grounds or the other students. She was looking directly at Harry. She was 13 and she was taller than he'd expected from the letters and the drawings, and she had the same fair hair and the same enormous eyes, and when she saw him looking back at her the expression on her face was something he'd seen in the drawings she'd sent him, that calm, certain quality of someone who has confirmed something they already knew. She raised her right hand slightly. He raised his left hand. Both marks visible in the autumn light. Then Madame Maxime swept past, enormous, impressive, radiating authority, and the Beauxbatons group moved with her and Gabrielle was carried along with them into the castle, and Harry put his hand down and looked at his palm for a moment. "Who's that?" Ron appeared at his elbow, nodding after the Beauxbatons group. "Someone I know," Harry said. "That girl in the back?" "She was looking at you like," Ron paused, searching for the word. "I don't know how she was looking at you. But it was very specifically at you." "I know her," Harry said again. "Long story." "You always say that." "Because the stories are always long." Ron considered this with the philosophical acceptance he brought to most of Harry's less explicable circumstances, and offered him a pumpkin pasty by way of changing the subject. Harry took it and they walked back toward the castle. He found Gabrielle that evening. She'd been installed in the Beauxbatons wing with the other students, and he hadn't been sure she'd be allowed to simply leave, but she appeared at the entrance to the library at 7:30 as if they'd arranged it, which they hadn't, and walked directly to the table where he was sitting. She was taller. That was the first thing, she was tall now in a way her earlier letters hadn't suggested, the same height as Katia, with the same Veela quality as her mother and sister but worn differently. Less performed. More internal. She sat down across from him and put her bag on the table and looked at him with those enormous blue eyes with absolutely no self-consciousness. "You look exactly like your magic," she said. "That's a strange compliment." "It wasn't specifically a compliment. I just meant you match." She opened her bag. "I brought the new diagrams. I've been working on the resonance model. I think I understand what happens at the triad node now." "Hello, Gabrielle," Harry said. She looked up. Then the corner of her mouth turned up in a way that was very slightly like Katia's ghost smile but warmer, more immediate. "Hello, Harry." She paused. "I wanted to look at you first. Before the social part." "Fair enough. You have more light than last summer," she said. "The magic has been growing." "The lens effect," Katia explained the lens to you, yes?" She did. "She's been watching too. Through the bond. She notices it in her hand." Gabrielle pulled out a folder and opened it on the table between them. The diagrams inside were dense and layered and genuinely unlike anything Harry had seen in any textbook, a private visual language she'd been building since she was 10. "The dual bond isn't just amplifying you. It's been maturing, I think. Like it's becoming what it was supposed to be." "What was it supposed to be?" "I don't know yet. But it's not finished." She looked up. "Someone entered you in the tournament." "Yes. Because of the bond." "Most likely." She looked at the diagram in front of her for a moment, then at her right hand. "When I heard, I felt it in the mark. Like a pressure. Something reaching." She looked at him steadily. "Someone wants to use the bond to claim you. Through the tournament contract." "Karkaroff," Harry said. "We think. Katia thinks so too. She wrote to me." Gabrielle turned a page. "He doesn't understand what the bond actually is. He's working from legal theory, not magical reality. His argument requires the brand to function as a proprietary claim, but the bond isn't proprietary, it's resonant. You can't claim resonance. It's not a possession. It's a frequency. Harry looked at her. You're 13. I know, she said, in the exact tone she'd used at 8 when Katya had said it. But I'm right. He exhaled. Can you write that down? The resonance argument? In terms I can put in a legal brief? She pulled a fresh piece of parchment from her bag and picked up her pen. Tell me what the brief needs to say and I'll tell you the magical theory that supports it. Katya's writing to Sarkova. I need the argument that the bond's nature is incompatible with the proprietary claim Karkaroff's lawyers are making. Gabrielle started writing. Harry watched her work, the same focus quality he recognized from the diagrams, the way her pen moved with more certainty than most 13-year-olds brought to anything. She wrote for 10 minutes without stopping, and what she produced was 3 clear paragraphs of magical theory that would have looked at home in a graduate-level academic journal. She slid it across the table. He read it. Twice. You understand this is going to end up in front of the International Confederation. I know. Use my name. It's accurate, they can verify it. You want your name on a brief that challenges Durmstrang's institutional claim. I want the truth on a brief that challenges a false claim. She met his eyes. My bond, Harry. My right to say what it is. Something in his chest settled in the way it did when someone said something that was exactly and completely right. Okay, he said. She nodded. Then she looked at the diagram again and said, more quietly, the bond was worried about you. Since the goblet announcement. Both marks. She touched her right palm. You weren't scared, which is, I didn't expect you to be scared. But the bond was worried anyway. The bond is smarter than I am, maybe. Maybe. The ghost smile again. Fleur wants to meet you. She's decided you're her competition. I'm the same age as you. She knows. She's decided anyway. Gabrielle closed her folder. Don't let her Veela charm work on you. She doesn't mean to use it but she does when she's nervous. Just, look slightly past her eyes. It helps. Noted, Harry said. Does it work on you? The charm? I have full Veela heritage, Gabrielle said, with simple certainty. I don't get charmed. I do the charming. A pause. I haven't decided yet whether I want to use it on people. Maman says it's a tool. Fleur says it's a gift. I think it's more complicated than either. Probably is, Harry agreed. She stood. Picked up her bag. Paused. Katya, she said, in the way of someone choosing words. She's been carrying the brand for 5 years. And she stopped. What? Gabrielle looked at him with the direct, clear-eyed quality she brought to everything. She's been alone with it. She didn't mean to brand you and she spent 5 years researching it and writing you letters and being careful and precise about everything and I think she searched for the right word. I think she is more than she lets herself show you. In the letters. Harry was quiet for a moment. I'll keep that in mind, he said carefully. Gabrielle nodded once, satisfied in the way of someone who has delivered necessary information, and walked out of the library. Harry sat alone for a moment with both marks warm on his hands and the quiet hum of the castle around him and Gabrielle's 3 paragraphs on the table and the complicated feeling of being 13 and in the middle of something vast and not frightened by it, but aware of it, aware of all of it, the way you're aware of weather coming in. He found Viktor the next morning. Viktor was on the grounds before breakfast, actual running, laps of the lake, in a heavy training regime that Katya had once described in a letter as Viktor's method of processing large emotions through physical exhaustion. Harry fell into step beside him without preamble. Viktor looked at him sideways without breaking stride. Potter. Viktor. Harry matched his pace easily, not sprinting, just a solid long-distance run. Katya told you? Yes. Viktor's jaw was set. His strides were longer than Harry's. Last night. And I want to break Karkaroff's teeth. He said it with the flat calm of someone reporting a weather forecast. But that is not useful. No, Harry agreed. He used my family's name, Viktor said. He used the Krum brand to file a political claim with the council, without telling me, without asking Katya, he cut himself off. Breathed. The brand is my family. Not Durmstrang. Not Karkaroff. Mine. Your sister's, Harry said. She made it. Viktor was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. She did. Another silence. Then, with slightly more difficulty, I was angry about that. When Katya first told me. I thought, she was 16 and she marked a 9-year-old English boy and it created complications. I was angry. I know. You told me in your first letter. You wrote back very calmly. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't Katya's fault. Getting angry at you for it seemed like wasted energy. Viktor ran for another 30 seconds. Then, you are strange, Potter. Katya says you are strange in a good way. I am deciding if I agree. Take your time, Harry said. A short silence that had something in it that wasn't quite humor but was related to it. Karkaroff will not back down from his claim willingly, Viktor said. He has invested too much. He needs the Confederation to take the case seriously enough to pressure Dumbledore, and if the tournament contract is already binding, then he has leverage regardless of whether the claim holds legally, Harry finished. I know. We're working on the legal argument. Gabrielle wrote something last night that should help. Viktor glanced at him. The little Delacour. She's not little anymore, Harry said. She's our age. Viktor processed this. She is a Veela child, he said, careful and slightly stiff in the way of someone navigating cultural territory. The Delacour claim on the bond and the Krum claim are not, Viktor. Harry stopped running. Viktor ran another 3 strides and stopped too, turning. Harry looked at him levelly. Gabrielle's brand is on my right hand. Katya's is on my left. They're both there. They've both been there for 5 years. I'm not going to pretend one of them doesn't exist to make the political situation tidier. Viktor met his gaze. He was 17, broad and physically imposing in a way that had probably worked on most people his whole life. He looked at Harry and what he found, apparently, was someone who wasn't performing anything and wasn't going to start. He exhaled. Nodded. Fair, he said. I need you to do something, Harry said. I need you to talk to Karkaroff. Not about the claim, don't mention the legal argument. I need him to think that you're frustrated about the situation but contained. That he still has your cooperation. Viktor's eyes narrowed. You want me to lie to my headmaster? I want you to not show him your hand before we've shown him ours. Harry held his gaze. If Karkaroff knows we're actively countering his legal argument, he'll move faster. We need time for Sarkova to pull his council filings. Viktor was quiet for a long moment. Then, you are 13 years old. I know. Katya said you think quickly. He said it in the same tone someone might say the forecasters said it would rain, confirming observed reality. She was not exaggerating. He ran a hand over his face. Fine. I will talk to Karkaroff. I will be contained. He looked distinctly unhappy about this. But when the time comes, I am not contained. When the time comes, Harry agreed, nobody's contained. Viktor nodded once, sharp and definite. They ran back toward the castle. The lake was grey and still in the early morning, and the Durmstrang ship sat in it like a dark word. Harry watched it and felt both marks warm and thought about Karkaroff's eyes on the bank, that inventory look, that calculation, and thought about what Gabrielle had written. You can't claim resonance. It's not a possession. It's a frequency. He pressed his left palm flat against his leg as he ran. Karkaroff was about to find out what happened when you tried to claim the wrong frequency. The letter from Sarkova arrived 4 days later. It was short, which meant she'd found what she was looking for immediately. Harry. I have the council filings. Karkaroff filed 11 months ago under the Slavic Branding Oversight Provision, Article 7, citing educational interference. His legal argument is more sophisticated than I expected. Someone with genuine knowledge of international magical law helped him draft it. This is not amateur work. However, the weakness in his argument is significant and it is exactly what you suspected. He has filed the brand as a proprietary claim. This is legally incorrect under the actual provisions of the Slavic tradition he's citing. The brand creates obligation, not ownership. He has deliberately misread his own tradition to construct a claim that doesn't exist in the law he's invoking. I am already drafting the counterbrief. I need the magical theory argument about the bond's resonant nature. Can you get it to me within 48 hours? Mirela Sarkova P.S. You are in the tournament. I'm sorry. The binding contract is real and Dumbledore cannot override it. But being in the tournament does not grant Karkaroff's claim validity. They are separate matters, and I will make sure they stay separate. Harry read it twice. Then he went and found Gabrielle. She handed him the expanded version of her magical theory argument without him having to ask, because she'd apparently already known Sarkova would need more. You knew she'd write? Harry said. The bond told me something was coming. She said it the way she said everything, as simple fact. I've been working on it for 2 days. He looked at the document. 6 pages. Dense, rigorous, the margins annotated in her distinctive hand. Footnotes in 3 languages. Gabrielle. This is extraordinary. She looked up from her bag. The calm certainty she brought to everything softened, just slightly, in a way that was more visible than she probably intended. I know the bond, she said quietly. Better than anyone. I've been drawing it since I was 8. Of course I can describe it accurately. I know, Harry said. He stopped. Thank you. Both of you. You and Katya. Gabrielle looked at him for a moment with that clear, grave quality. Then she picked up her pen and added a final line to the document. He looked at it after she put the pen down. In French, in her handwriting, at the bottom of the last page, she'd written something. What does that say? He asked. The bond is not a chain. It is not a tool. It is not a claim. It is a choice, made by 3 people, whether or not they know yet that they are making it. Silence. For the brief, he said. For anyone who needs to understand what they're actually dealing with, she said. Harry folded the document carefully and put it in his pocket next to his letter from Sarkova, and thought about Karkaroff, and the goblet, and the tournament contract, and the weight of being 13 and entered in something he hadn't asked for by someone who'd underestimated everything about him. He thought about Viktor containing himself. About Katya writing to Sarkova. About Gabrielle spending 2 days expanding a legal theory document with the focused attention of someone who has decided this matters and is going to make sure the mattering is visible. The bond is a choice, made by 3 people. He pressed his palm flat on his knee. Both marks. Warm. Present. His. He walked out into the cold October corridor and toward the Ollery, and the castle hummed its old deep hum around him, and somewhere in the castle Karkaroff was calculating, and somewhere Viktor was running, and the goblet of fire was standing in the entrance hall with its cold blue flame, and Harry Potter walked through all of it with his eyes open and his hands warm and absolutely no intention of letting anyone turn him into someone else's political asset. Not now. Not ever. Chapter 4, The Veela Council. The summons arrived on a Wednesday. Not a letter. Not an owl. A flat disk of polished white stone, about the size of a large coin, that appeared on Harry's pillow between the time he went down to breakfast and the time he came back up to get his Transfiguration textbook. It was warm to the touch, warmer than the brands, warmer than anything should be that had been sitting on a cotton pillowcase in an October morning. When he picked it up, the surface clouded briefly and then cleared, and in the clouding he saw, for just a moment, the impression of a sun sigil. The same sigil as his right palm. He turned it over. On the back, in script so fine it looked engraved rather than written, were 3 lines in French. He took it to Gabrielle. She read it in about 4 seconds, looked at the disc, looked at him, and said, "Maman. Your mother sent this?" She summoned it. Gabrielle set the disc down on the table between them. They were in the small antechamber off the library that the Beauxbatons students had quietly colonized as a study space, and it was empty except for them at this hour. This is a council token. The Southern Veela Council uses them to issue formal invitations. She paused, and something in her expression was navigating something complicated. It's not optional. What does it say? It says, she translated without picking the disc back up, like she'd rather not touch it again. It says the Southern Veela Council requests the presence of the bearer of the Veela bond at the council's convening on Saturday next, in recognition of the bond's formal acknowledgement, for the purpose of the claiming ceremony. She looked at him. That last part. The claiming ceremony. That's the part I'd have told them not to write. What is it? It's a traditional Veela ceremony that formally acknowledges a bond between a Veela lineage holder and a bound person. She said it carefully, each word placed with precision. In tradition, the ceremony involves the council recognizing the bond and the bound person formally accepting the bond's terms. Accepting the terms, Harry repeated. Yes. The terms being? In traditional practice, Gabrielle said, still carefully, the bound person affirms their connection to the Veela lineage. Their placement within the clan's protection. Their acknowledgement of the bond's permanence. She looked at her right hand. It's usually presented as an honor. As formal recognition. But in practice it historically established the bound person as being under the council's authority in matters related to the bond. She looked up at him. My mother loves me. She genuinely believes this is the right thing to do. But she is the head of the Southern Veela Council, Harry. She thinks about the clan first. She has always thought about the clan first. Harry looked at the disc. Karkaroff filed his claim 11 months ago, he said. Yes. Did your mother know about Karkaroff's claim before the tournament started? Gabrielle was quiet for a moment. I don't know, she said, honestly. She might have. She met his eyes. I'm not saying she planned this to counter Karkaroff. I don't think she did. But I think, the timing is convenient for her. If the council formally acknowledges the bond through the claiming ceremony, it creates a competing institutional claim to Karkaroff's Durmstrang argument. The council would have legal standing to argue that the bond is already recognized under Veela law, which would undercut the Slavic Magical Council's jurisdiction over the matter. She's using the claiming ceremony as a legal countermeasure. Probably. Gabrielle picked the disc up after all, turned it in her fingers. Without knowing it's what she's doing. Or, she knows, but she believes both things at once. That it's genuine and that it's useful. Maman is, she's very good at believing 2 things at once when both of them benefit the clan. Harry looked at her. You're not defending her. No, Gabrielle said. I love her. I'm not defending this. She put the disc down. What are you going to do? Go, Harry said. She looked at him. Harry, if I don't go, the council takes that as a rejection of the bond. Which creates its own legal problem. A rejected bond has different standing than an acknowledged one. He'd been reading Katia's books for 3 years, and this particular wrinkle had come up twice in the historical records. And if the council doesn't have formal standing on the bond, Karkaroff's Slavic claim is the only institutional voice. Which is worse? But the claiming ceremony, I'll go, Harry said. On my terms. Gabrielle looked at him for a long moment. They won't like that. I know. The council is very old and they're not used to people declining to do what the ceremony requires. They'll see it as, I know what they'll see it as, Harry said. He looked at the disc. Where is it being held? There's a Veela council chamber in London. Near Diagon Alley. She paused. I'll be there. Maman will want me there. I know. He picked up the disc. The warmth of it settled into his right palm, over the sigil, like two things recognizing each other. Write to Katia. Tell her what's happening. Gabrielle was already reaching for her pen. Katia's response arrived Friday morning, one day before the council convening, and it was 3 pages that Harry read standing in the Ollery because he hadn't wanted to wait the time it took to walk down to the common room. The first page was research. She'd found the claiming ceremony in the Durmstrang records, not because Durmstrang practiced it, but because there was historical documentation of it from the 16th century when a Durmstrang-affiliated wizard had been bonded to a Veela clan member and been summoned to a similar ceremony. The record was extensive on what the ceremony involved and what had happened when the wizard in question had complied with its traditional form. He'd spent 20 years effectively under the council's authority in all matters touching the bond. Do not perform the full ceremony. The council cannot compel you to accept terms you haven't agreed to. They can witness the bond. They can acknowledge it. They cannot, under actual Veela clan law, which I have now read extensively, require your formal submission to their authority. That portion of the traditional ceremony is custom, not law. There is a difference, and they are hoping you don't know it. Know it. The third page was shorter. I can't be there. Durmstrang students don't attend Veela council proceedings. But I want you to know that the brand on your left hand is the Krum family brand, and the Krum family's position, my position, is that the bond belongs to you. Not to me, not to Durmstrang, not to the Krum name, and not to the Southern Veela Council. Walk in there and say what's true. That's all. KPS Viktor says to tell you he would come if he could. He also says you don't need him there, which is both correct and something he had difficulty admitting, so I am including it because he'll never say it himself. Harry folded the letter and put it in his inside pocket. He could feel both marks warm on his palms in the cold air of the Ollery. Hedwig ruffled her feathers at him from her perch and he scratched her head briefly. I know, he said, to no one in particular. He went to get his coat. The Veela council chamber was accessed through a door in a Diagon Alley side street that didn't exist unless you were looking for it, a fact Harry confirmed by walking past the door 3 times before his right palm warmed in a sudden, directional way that turned him around and faced him at a door that was simply there now, old oak and brass, carved with the sun sigil. Gabrielle was waiting outside it. She was dressed differently than at Hogwarts, formal, in the Beauxbatons silver blue but richer, with her hair up in a way that made her look older than 13 and considerably more composed. She looked at him when he arrived and the composure slipped slightly into something more honestly anxious. You came, she said. I said I would. I know. She stopped. Looked at the door. Maman is inside with the council. 6 members including her. They are all she searched. Certain, she settled on. They are very certain about things. Good, Harry said. So am I. She looked at him, and the anxiety in her expression resolved into something else, the clear, forward-looking quality he associated with her diagrams, the look of someone who has taken stock of a situation and decided to navigate rather than resist. Stay on the resonance argument, she said quietly. The bond as frequency, not possession. If they push the traditional form of the ceremony, use the word custom against law, Katia identified the exact point where they exceed their legal authority, and I've memorized it. You've memorized it. I've memorized it, she confirmed, matter-of-factly. He looked at her for a moment. You're not going to just sit quietly in this meeting, are you? I'm 13 and it's my bond, she said. No. He almost smiled. Good. He pushed open the door. The chamber was older than anything he'd encountered in the magical world so far, older feeling even than Hogwarts, with the specific quality of age that belongs to places where power has been concentrated for a very long time. The walls were pale stone hung with tapestries in gold and cream, each one depicting scenes he didn't have the cultural context to read fully but which clearly told a story, Veela women in various postures of authority, of protection, of something that looked like war. The council sat in a crescent arrangement of high-backed chairs, 6 of them, all women, ranging in age from perhaps 30 to what Harry estimated was ancient, though with full Veela heritage age was unreliable as a visual indicator. They all had the quality of light that Apollon had, and Gabrielle had in a more nascent form, the slight luminosity, the too perfect bone structure, the air that seemed warmer near them. Apollon Delacour sat in the centermost chair. She was exactly as Harry remembered from Cavendish Court, silver-robed, dark-haired, beautiful in the way of weapons that are also art. When Harry entered, she watched him with an expression that was welcoming and assessing in equal and simultaneous measure. Gabrielle went to stand near the wall to Harry's right, not quite beside him, but visible to him if he turned his head. Harry Potter, Apollon said. Her English was flawless and warmly accented. We are glad you accepted our invitation. Thank you for the token, Harry said. He didn't sit, no seat had been offered. He stood in the center of the crescent and looked at the 6 of them with the same comfortable directness he brought to everything. It's an unusual way to invite someone. The council communicates through traditional means, said the oldest woman, to Apollon's right, in French accented English more heavily accented than Apollon's. You will find much of what we do here is traditional. I've been reading about your traditions, Harry said. Quite a lot, actually. The oldest woman's eyes sharpened slightly. Apollon's expression shifted in a way that suggested she was recalibrating. Then you understand the purpose of today's convening, Apollon said. The bond between my daughter and you has been in existence for 5 years. It is time for formal acknowledgement. I agree, Harry said. The bond should be acknowledged. I have no objection to that. A slight collective ease in the council's posture, premature, Harry thought. The claiming ceremony will, the woman to Apollon's left began. I'm not going to perform the claiming ceremony, Harry said. Not in its traditional form. The ease reversed. The temperature in the room didn't change, but something in it did, a subtle shift in attention, in focus, all 6 of them orienting toward him with the concentrated regard of people who are not often interrupted. Apollon was very still. You refuse to acknowledge the bond? No, Harry said. I said I won't perform the claiming ceremony in its traditional form. Those are different statements. He looked at her steadily. The bond is real. It's been on my right hand for 5 years, Madame Delacour. I don't need a ceremony to acknowledge what I feel in my palm every time your daughter is worried about something. He paused. She was worried about coming in here today, for instance. Gabrielle made a small sound near the wall. Apollon looked at Gabrielle briefly, then back at Harry. The traditional claiming ceremony is the council's method of formally recognizing, the oldest woman began. The traditional claiming ceremony, in its full form, includes an affirmation in which the bound person acknowledges the council's authority in all matters relating to the bond, Harry said. He kept his voice level, not challenging, not performing confrontation, just stating fact. That portion of the ceremony isn't required by Veela clan law. It's custom. The law requires the council to witness the bond and acknowledge it. The law does not require me to place myself under the council's authority. He looked at the oldest woman. I've read the relevant sections. I can cite them if it would be helpful. A silence. The oldest woman looked at him with an expression that was complicated, not angry, precisely, but containing the particular edge of someone who expected a different kind of opponent and has found something sharper. You have been advised, she said. Someone has prepared you for this meeting. Yes, Harry said. Several people who understand the bond far better than Karkaroff's lawyers do. He let that land. He watched the slight shift in Apollin's expression when he named Karkaroff, not surprise, but acknowledgement. You know about his filing with the Slavic Magical Council. We are aware of it, Apollin said carefully. Then you know that the claiming ceremony, in its full traditional form, creates a competing institutional claim that would legally undercut his Article 7 argument. He looked at her. I'm not saying that's why you arranged this. I'm saying it's why the timing works in the council's favor, and I think you know that. Something crossed Apollin's face, a complicated, layered expression that Harry read, correctly, as the look of someone who has been understood more fully than they intended. You are 14 years old, she said, not as an accusation. More as an observation about something that surprised her. 13, Harry said. Not 14 until July. 13, she repeated. The bond is 5 years old, Harry said. I've had time to think about it. He looked along the crescent. Here's what I'm willing to do. I'll acknowledge the bond on the record of this council. I'll affirm its reality and its permanence. I'll state formally that Gabrielle's brand on my right hand is real and recognized and that the connection it creates is genuine. He paused. But the council doesn't have authority over the bond. No institution does. Not the Veela Council, not Durmstrang, not the Slavic Magical Council. The bond is between me and Gabrielle. And between me and Viktor Krum. Both of them. You cannot claim one and not acknowledge the other. The room went very still. The Krum brand, the woman to Apollin's left said, as if the words had an unpleasant texture. Is on my left hand, Harry said. Yes. Both brands are real, both are permanent, and any formal acknowledgement of the bond has to acknowledge both. He looked at Apollin. If the council's acknowledgement is contingent on excluding the Krum brand, then the council isn't acknowledging the bond. It's acknowledging a partial version of the bond that suits its political interests. He let that sit. I'm not going to participate in that. Apollin said nothing for a long moment. She looked at Harry with an expression that was moving through several states, calculation, resistance, something that eventually arrived, slowly, at a different quality. More genuine. You are protecting Viktor Krum's claim, she said. I'm protecting the truth of the bond, Harry said. Viktor's claim is part of the truth. So is Gabrielle's. They both exist. You can't do legal magic on a partial truth and expect it to hold. Apollin looked at Gabrielle. Gabrielle looked back at her mother without flinching. Something passed between them, a long, quiet look that had years of history in it, the specific texture of a mother and daughter who know each other very well and are not always in agreement. Then Apollin looked back at Harry, and when she did something in her expression had settled into something different. Not defeated, nothing about Apollin Delacour suggested she was familiar with defeat. But recalibrated. Genuinely. What form, she said, slowly, would you propose for the acknowledgement? A witness statement, Harry said. On the record of the council. That the Southern Veela Council acknowledges the existence of a Veela bond between Gabrielle Delacour and Harry Potter, and acknowledges the coexistence of a Slavic branding bond between Viktor Krum and Harry Potter, and that both bonds are recognized as extant, permanent, and belonging to the individuals involved, not to any institution. That is not a claiming ceremony, the oldest woman said. She didn't sound angry. She sounded thoughtful. No, Harry said. It isn't. It is something else, the oldest woman said. Something without tradition. Maybe, Harry said. Or maybe it's what the tradition was meant to be, before the legal machinery got added to it. Another silence. Longer this time. Then the oldest woman made a sound that was, Harry realized, a laugh. Short and genuine and surprised out of her. "Bold child," she said. Not unkindly. "I've been told that," Harry said. She looked at Apollon. Something exchanged between them, a long look, council members communicating in the way of people who have known each other for decades. Apollon looked at the other 4 council members in turn. Each one, silently, gave a slight nod. She looked back at Harry. "The council will consider your proposed form," she said. "We will need to confer privately." A pause. "You will wait in the anteroom." "Of course," Harry said. The anteroom was small and simply furnished, with 2 chairs and a low table and a window that showed a courtyard Harry couldn't place. He sat in one of the chairs. Gabrielle came in after him and sat in the other, and they looked at each other for a moment. "You cited the law," Gabrielle said. "Katya found the citations. You explained the theory. I just used what you both gave me. You used it better than I expected." She folded her hands in her lap. "Maman is impressed. She doesn't show it that way, but that look she had, the one where she went quiet. Yes. That's her impressed look." Gabrielle paused. "And you made Madame Levine laugh. She hasn't laughed in a council session in my lifetime. Maman always says she was born without a sense of humor." "She just needed the right material," Harry said. Gabrielle's smile, when it came, was fuller than the ghost smiles he usually got from her, genuine and warm and slightly surprised, the smile of someone who has been told about something and is now experiencing it and finding it exactly right. Then it faded back to serious. "You said both bonds," she said quietly. "In front of the council. You said you wouldn't let them acknowledge one without the other." "Of course," Harry said. "Katya doesn't know you did that. She will when you tell her." Gabrielle was quiet for a moment. Outside, the courtyard was still. "She's been carrying the brand like it's a mistake she made," Gabrielle said, carefully. "She made a mistake at 16 and it became complicated. And she fixed it the only way she knew how, which was to research it and understand it and write you letters every 2 weeks for 3 years. But I don't think she's ever thought of herself as having a claim equal to mine." Harry looked at his hands. "She does," he said. "I know," Gabrielle said. "You know. She doesn't fully know." A pause. "Tell her. In the next letter. Don't just imply it, tell her directly." "Are you managing me?" Harry said. "Yes," Gabrielle said, with complete serenity. He looked at her. There was something there, in the way she said it, in the comfort of it, that was entirely characteristic of who she'd become over 5 years of letters and drawings and the bond running like a warm thread through everything. She managed things the way she drew things, with the quiet certainty of someone who sees clearly and acts on what she sees. "All right," Harry said. "I'll tell her." "Good." Gabrielle settled back in her chair. "Now. Fleur is going to be furious about all of this." "Why?" "Because she's the Beauxbatons champion and she's here representing the family and she spent last night preparing a speech for the council about Veela honor and the sacred bond tradition, and you've walked in and rearranged the entire proceeding without telling her." She said it with the affection of a sibling who is also enjoying themselves slightly. "She's going to be absolutely furious. I'll apologize to her." "She won't want an apology. She'll want to be impressed and she'll resist it." Gabrielle paused. "Don't let the Veela charm affect you when she does it. She does it when she's emotionally off balance. You told me already." Look past her eyes. "I'm reminding you." She glanced at the door. "There'll be another 20 minutes. The council doesn't decide quickly. Is there anything else I should know before they come back?" Gabrielle thought. Madame Levine, the one who laughed. She's the eldest. She also has the most actual authority in council law. If she supports the proposed acknowledgement, the others will follow Maman's lead, but Maman will follow hers. She paused. She liked you. I could tell. Because I quoted the law at her? Because you were honest, Gabrielle said simply. The council gets a lot of people performing reverence at it. They don't get many people being simply honest. She looked at him. You're always honest. Even when it would be easier not to be. Harry didn't answer that for a moment. Your diagram, he said. The one you sent me the week before the council token arrived. The one with the new resonance mapping. She looked at him. What about it? You'd already drawn this meeting. Not specifically, but the structure of it. The 3-point acknowledgement. 2 brands, 1 bond, recognized together. You drew it before the token came. She was quiet. The bond told you this was coming, he said. The bond tells me a lot of things, she said, very quietly. I'm still learning which ones to act on and which ones are, just the bond being, itself. What does the bond say now? She looked at him for a long moment, with those enormous clear blue eyes, and her expression was something he'd never quite seen from her before, not the serenity, not the certainty, but something underneath both of those, something younger and more exposed. That this is the right room, she said. That we're doing the right thing. She paused. That it matters that you said both. Harry pressed his palms flat on his knees. Both marks warm. Both present. The familiar steadiness of them, the thing that had been his since he was 9 years old and hadn't known what magic was. The door opened. Apollon stood in the threshold, with Madame Levine just behind her right shoulder. The council, Apollon said, has agreed to your proposed form of acknowledgement. She said it with the grace of someone making a concession look like a considered decision, which Harry suspected was a skill she developed over decades of council politics. With one addition. What addition? Harry said. Madame Levine wishes to speak to the bond directly, Apollon said. Not to you. To the bond itself. She paused. She has the ability to read a magical connection, to hear it, she says, in a way that most cannot. She would like to witness it firsthand before we put our names to the acknowledgement. Harry looked at Madame Levine. The eldest council member was watching him with those sharp, amused eyes. She had the quality of someone who had been doing this for a very long time and remained, despite everything, genuinely curious. What does that involve? Harry asked. You show me your hands, Madame Levine said. Her English was old and careful, each word considered. Both of them. And I listen. Harry held out both hands, palms up. She stepped forward and looked at them, first his left, the geometric Krum brand, then his right, the Veela sun sigil. She didn't touch either hand. She just looked, for a long time, in a way that felt less like looking and more like reading. Then she made a sound. Low and thoughtful. The dual resonance, she said, almost to herself. I read about it once. In records older than this council. She looked up at Harry. You know what you carry. I'm learning, Harry said. The Krum brand is not subdued by the Veela bond, she said. And the Veela bond is not crowded by the Krum brand. They coexist. She looked at his palms. They reinforce each other. Each one makes the other more stable. She was quiet for a moment. This is not a conflict of claims. This is a structure. Something built. She looked up at him. Someone should have told you this years ago. Someone did, Harry said. She's 13 and she draws it better than anyone can describe it. Madame Levine looked at Gabrielle across the room. Something in the old woman's expression shifted into warmth. Show me, Madame Levine said to Gabrielle. Gabrielle reached into her bag without hesitation and produced the folder of diagrams she brought everywhere. Madame Levine sat down in the nearest chair and opened it and looked at the first page for a very long time. "Yes," she said eventually. "Yes. This is exactly it." She looked up at Apollon. "The child has been reading the bond correctly since she was 8 years old." Apollon looked at Gabrielle. "I know," she said, and something in her voice was complicated and genuine in equal measure. "I know she has." The acknowledgement was witnessed an hour later. All 6 council members. Apollon's hand on the record. Madame Levine's signature first, which apparently was significant. Harry standing in the center of the crescent and stating, in clear, even terms, the reality of both bonds, both marks, both connections, and the council acknowledging all of it. Not claiming it. Not placing authority over it. Simply acknowledging what was real. When it was done, Madame Levine looked at him with those sharp eyes and said, "This document will be filed with the International Confederation. It will be seen by Karkaroff's lawyers within the week." "I know," Harry said. "They will not like it." "I know that too." "It does not resolve the tournament situation," she said. "You are still entered. The contract is still binding." "I know," Harry said, for the 3rd time. "But now anyone trying to use the bond as a legal claim has to deal with a council record that defines the bond on the bond's own terms. That changes the argument." Madame Levine looked at him for a moment. Then she smiled, a proper smile this time, not the surprised laugh from earlier, but a deliberate one. "Come and see us again," she said. "When this is over. I would like to talk to you about those records I mentioned. The old ones." She glanced at Gabrielle. "Bring her. She'll have questions I would actually enjoy answering." "We will," Harry said. He walked out of the chamber into the Diagon Alley side street. The door ceased to exist behind him with the soft finality of magical spaces that are only there when they need to be. Gabrielle came out a moment later, pulling her coat on. She stood beside him on the pavement and they both looked at the ordinary street, the ordinary afternoon. "Right," Harry said. "Right," Gabrielle agreed. He flexed both hands. The marks were warm and clear in the afternoon light, both of them, geometric and flowing, the 2 patterns that Gabrielle had drawn overlapping in her diagrams 100 times, the 2 brands that Madame Levine had confirmed were not competing claims but a structure. Something built. He thought about Katya in Durmstrang, researching and writing and carrying the brand like a mistake she'd made. He thought about what he was going to write in the next letter. Not implied. Direct. "I need to find an owl," he said. "There's a post office on the main street," Gabrielle said. "I'll walk with you." They walked side by side through Diagon Alley, in the thin October sunshine, and the marks on Harry's hands were warm all the way there. Chapter 5, The Storm Between Schools. The council record reached Karkaroff on a Monday. Harry knew because Katya wrote him Tuesday morning, and her letter had the controlled urgency quality of something written quickly and sent faster, the handwriting slightly less precise than usual, the sentences shorter. He called Viktor into his office last night. "I could hear it through the wall. I was in the adjacent study, which was not accidental." He didn't shout. Karkaroff never shouts. He's worse when he's quiet. He told Viktor that the council filing was a coordinated attack on Durmstrang's institutional integrity and that Viktor needed to decide where his loyalties were. Viktor told him his loyalties were to his family and his conscience and that Durmstrang was welcome to a 3rd place if it conducted itself honorably. Viktor then left the office. "Harry, Karkaroff's people are going to move. I don't know when or how, but the filing changed the shape of the argument and he knows it. He needed the council's claim to be uncontested so Slavic law would be the only institutional voice. Now it isn't. He has to act before Sarkova's counterbrief reaches the full Confederation panel, which she says will happen before the tournament's second task. Be careful. This is going to get physical before it gets resolved. KPS. I got your last letter. The one before this one. I've read it 4 times. I don't have the right words yet. I will write back properly when I find them. Harry read the postscript twice, then folded the letter and went to find Viktor. Viktor had taken to training on the grounds in the early mornings with a small group of the senior Durmstrang students, not all of them, just the 3 or 4 he actually trusted, which Harry had gathered from Katya's letters was a small number by design rather than circumstance. Viktor was selective. Viktor had always been selective. He treated trust like a resource with a limited supply and allocated it accordingly. Harry came down to the lake at 6:30 and found Viktor mid-drill, running a combat sequence with a blonde Durmstrang 6th year named Alexei that looked less like practice and more like 2 people who were genuinely trying to hit each other. He waited until they stopped. Viktor walked over, not breathing hard, and looked at Harry with that dark-eyed assessment he brought to everything. You got Katya's letter. This morning, Harry said. Mine came last night. Viktor looked at the lake. He's going to do something with the students. Use them. I have noticed things. The way he speaks to Mikhail and Petrov's group. The older boys who follow him. He paused. They are not good boys, Harry. Harry had noticed this too. There was a group of 8 or 9 senior Durmstrang students who moved differently from the others, tighter, more deliberate, with the quality of people who had been told something that had changed how they looked at the world. They watched Harry in the corridors with an attention that wasn't curious. It was calculating. How many of them follow him willingly versus how many are afraid not to? Harry asked. Viktor considered. Half and half, maybe. Some of them believe the claim. That the bond entitles Durmstrang to something. Some of them are just, Karkaroff is a headmaster who knows things about people. Useful things. Things you don't want known. He said it flatly, like something he'd accepted. He has been headmaster for 14 years. What about the Beauxbatons students? Less unified, Viktor said. But Mademoiselle Delacour, he meant Fleur, she has been talking to her delegation. Her sister was at the council convening. People know the council has filed. Some of the Beauxbatons students are, he searched. They are proud of their Veela heritage. If Karkaroff's people push the claim, some of them will take it as a provocation. Which is probably what Karkaroff wants, Harry said. Beauxbatons and Durmstrang students in open conflict would create enough noise to disrupt the Confederation panel hearing Sarkova's brief. Political embarrassment at a tournament involving 3 schools. Viktor looked at him. You are always doing that. Doing what? Seeing the whole board, Viktor said. Most people see the piece in front of them. He was quiet for a moment. Katya says you have always been like this. Katya says a lot of things about me. Yes, Viktor said, and there was something careful in it, the careful of someone navigating around something they've decided not to say directly. She does. He looked back at the lake. What do you want to do? I want to know when Karkaroff moves. Not after, before, or as it's happening. Can you watch his people without them knowing you're watching? I am Viktor Krum, Viktor said, with a flatness that was its own kind of dry humor. Everyone expects me to be thinking about Quidditch. I can be in any room and nobody questions it. Good. Then be in rooms. Harry looked at the Durmstrang ship on the lake. If they're going to do something physical, they'll need a moment when I'm separated from the castle's main population. A corridor, the grounds at night, the lake path. You're using yourself as the draw. I'm the draw regardless. Better to know when and where than to be surprised. Viktor was quiet for a long moment, studying Harry with an expression that had moved somewhere past assessment and into something more plainly genuine. Katya was right, he said finally. You are strange in a good way. You keep almost saying that and then catching yourself. I am still deciding. Viktor almost smiled. The almost smile looked very like Katya's. Same family, same controlled quality. Give me 2 days, he said. The trouble started on a Wednesday evening, 8 days after the council record reached Karkaroff, and it started not with Harry but with Gabrielle. She'd been walking back from the library after dinner with 2 other Beauxbatons students, on the covered path that ran alongside the castle's east wing, when Mikhail, the largest of Karkaroff's inner group, a broad 7th year with a blonde crew cut and the particular confidence of someone who had been the biggest person in most rooms for a long time, stepped out of a doorway with 3 others and blocked the path. Harry wasn't there. He found out about it 11 minutes later when one of the Beauxbatons girls came to find him in the common room, breathless, because Gabrielle had apparently told her to get him specifically and the girl had no idea who he was, but Gabrielle had been very clear. He was moving before the girl finished the sentence. The east path was lit by floating lanterns that swayed slightly in the November wind off the lake. When Harry came around the corner he could see the scene clearly, Mikhail and his 3 companions on one side, Gabrielle and her remaining escort on the other, with the specific body language of people in the middle of something that had moved past words. Gabrielle was standing with the stillness of someone who has calculated all their options and is waiting for the right one to open. She wasn't afraid. Harry could tell that from 20 meters away, couldn't tell it from her face, which was controlled and neutral, but could tell it from the way she was standing, weight forward, hands loose at her sides, watching Mikhail with the clear-eyed attention of someone solving a problem. Mikhail was saying something in heavily accented English that Harry caught the end of as he came around the corner. Bond is Durmstrang's business. Your clan has no place, the council disagrees, Gabrielle said. Flat and certain. The council is a gathering of Veela women who have no standing in Slavic magical law. Tell me, Harry said, walking up the path toward them at a pace that was measured rather than hurried, are you actually this bad at reading a situation, or is this a performance? Mikhail turned. He looked at Harry with the inventory look, calculating size, distance, odds. Harry was 14 and smaller than Mikhail by about 6 inches and 40 pounds, and he watched Mikhail make this calculation and saw the confidence it produced, and thought, there it is. Potter, Mikhail said. You save us the trouble of looking. Happy to help, Harry said. He came to a stop about 5 feet from them. Close enough for conversation, far enough for space. He looked at Mikhail's 3 companions without any particular concern. 2 of them were doing the same size calculation Mikhail had done. The third one, younger, maybe a 6th year, standing slightly behind the others, was not quite meeting his eyes. The headmaster's position is that you owe Durmstrang an acknowledgement of Karkaroff's position, Harry said. Not Durmstrang's. Not Viktor's. Karkaroff's personal political project that he's been running for a year without telling most of the people whose names he attached to it. He looked at Mikhail levelly. Does Viktor know you're out here? A fractional hesitation. This doesn't involve, Viktor is a Krum, Harry said. The brand you're here to defend belongs to his family. So yes, it involves him. He glanced at the youngest of the 4, the one not making eye contact. Do you want to be here? The youngest one looked up. Something moved in his face. Don't talk to my people, Mikhail said, and his wand was out. Harry's right hand burned sharply. Not pain, warning. The Veela sigil flaring in the specific way it had been flaring since September when Quirrell walked past him in corridors, the instinctive alarm of something old and protective in the bond responding to threat before thought could catch up. He'd learned to listen to it. He didn't reach for his own wand. Instead he turned his right palm up, let it face Mikhail, and let the mark be visible, the Veela sun sigil, clear gold in the lantern light, glowing. Mikhail stared at it. You know what that is, Harry said. You've read Karkaroff's briefs. You know what both marks are and what they mean and what they're capable of. He turned his left palm up too. Both marks visible, both glowing, the 2 patterns that Madame Levine had called a structure. Put your wand down. You can't, I'm not threatening you, Harry said. I'm showing you what you're dealing with. Put your wand down and walk away, and this doesn't have to be something that gets reported. Mikhail looked at Harry's hands. At the marks. He was 17, trained in whatever Durmstrang trained its students in, with 3 allies and a drawn wand, and he was standing in the lantern light looking at the palms of a 14-year-old, and something in his face was recalculating. The headmaster's claim is legitimate, Mikhail said, but the certainty in it had changed texture. It had the quality now of something said because it needed to be said rather than because it was believed. Mirela Sarkova thinks otherwise, Harry said. The Southern Veela Council thinks otherwise. Viktor Krum thinks otherwise. And Katya Krum, whose brand that is, he lifted his left hand slightly, has been working for 3 years to make sure the legal record reflects what the bond actually is. He looked at Mikhail. You're fighting for a version of this story that's already losing. That's your business. But don't bring it to Gabrielle on a dark path. A silence. Then Mikhail put his wand away. He didn't say anything else. He looked at Harry for another moment with something that wasn't respect exactly but was adjacent to it, the look of someone who has pushed against something and found it immovable and is adjusting their model of the world accordingly. Then he turned and walked back the way he'd come, and the other 2 followed him. The youngest one, the one who hadn't met Harry's eyes, paused. He looked at Harry for a second. Then, quietly, in accented English, he submitted your name to the goblet. Karkaroff. I was in the room. He glanced at the departing backs of his companions. I didn't know it was wrong until after. I thought, he stopped. You should know. I already knew, Harry said. The boy nodded once. Then he followed the others. Harry stood on the path for a moment. Both marks fading back to invisible. He turned to look at Gabrielle. She was watching him with an expression that was evaluating and honest, and something else he couldn't immediately name. Her escort had relaxed visibly. The other Beauxbatons girl had a hand over her heart and was breathing with the relief of someone who'd been prepared for something much worse. Your hand, Gabrielle said. She meant the right palm. I felt it from here. The warning. I know. I felt yours before I came around the corner. He looked at her. Are you all right? I was all right before you arrived, she said. Not sharply, just factually. I was handling it. I know you were. But, she said, and some of the control in her expression shifted to something more genuine, I'm glad you came anyway. He nodded. They walked back toward the castle, the 3rd Beauxbatons girl trailing slightly behind, and the path was lit with swaying lanterns and the lake was dark beyond the grounds, and Harry thought about what the youngest Durmstrang student had said. I was in the room. I didn't know it was wrong until after. He thought about Karkaroff, who had spent a year building a case and submitted a 14-year-old boy's name to a magical contract without consent, and felt something that wasn't anger exactly. It was too clean for anger, too directed. It was clarity. The specific clarity of understanding exactly what someone is and exactly what needs to happen next. He wrote to Sarkova that night. The next 2 days had a specific kind of tension, the held breath quality of a situation that hasn't broken open yet but is going to, and everyone who's paying attention knows it. Karkaroff's inner group was less visible after the East Path incident, which didn't mean they'd stepped back so much as it meant they'd stepped sideways. Viktor sent Harry a short note. 3 of them came to me. Separately. Mikhail, Bobrov, and the young one, Yuri. They're not all his, Harry. Some of them were afraid. Now they're less afraid. Keep doing whatever you did. Harry wrote back, I just showed them the marks. Let the bond do the talking. Viktor's response, Katya would say that was elegant. I will just say it worked. Fleur found him on Thursday afternoon. She came to the table where he was sitting in the entrance hall, doing potions notes, and sat down across from him with the composed bearing of someone who has prepared for a conversation and intends to conduct it on their terms. She was 17, full Veela, and she brought the particular light in the air quality everywhere she went, and Harry looked slightly past her eyes the way Gabrielle had told him and found it manageable. "My sister speaks of you constantly," Fleur said, in precisely modulated English. "Good things, I hope," Harry said. "Useful things," Fleur said. "Which is Gabrielle's version of good things?" She looked at him with silver-grey eyes that were direct and sharp and considerably more intelligent than people seemed to expect from someone who looked the way she looked. "You were at the council meeting." "I was." "You changed the ceremony." "I proposed an alternative form." "The council agreed to it." "The council," Fleur said, with a slight edge, "does not agree to alternatives proposed by 14-year-olds. Not without significant motivation." She paused. "You argued the law at them." "I did." Madame Levine was impressed. She said it as if this surprised her, which Harry thought was slightly unfair to Madame Levine but kept to himself. Maman was impressed. "She didn't say so." "She doesn't say so. But I know her expressions." Gabrielle said the same thing. "Gabrielle says many things." Something in Fleur's manner shifted, the composed bearing adjusted, not abandoned but made more natural, and the Fleur underneath it was considerably less formal. "She's been talking about you since she was 8 years old. For 6 years I have been hearing about Harry and the bond and the diagrams. I had formed certain expectations." "And?" "You are what she said," Fleur said. "Which is irritating, because she is 13 and she was right about something I was skeptical of." She paused. "I wanted to see for myself." "Fair enough," Harry said. "What did you want to see?" "Whether you were using the bond. Whether you knew what you had and were managing it for your own purposes." She looked at him steadily. "Gabrielle she is not naive. She is genuinely the most perceptive person I know. But she has been connected to you since she was 8, and that kind of connection creates loyalty that can override judgment sometimes." "I wanted to check." Harry looked at her. "And you went to the East Path for her," Fleur said. "Not because she needed rescuing, she didn't, she was managing. But because someone told you she was there and you moved without thinking about it." She paused. "And the night at the council, you refused to let them acknowledge the bond without including the Krum brand. You could have let them recognize only Gabrielle's claim. It would have been easier. It would have given the Veela Council stronger legal standing against Karkaroff." "It would have been a lie," Harry said. "Yes," Fleur said. "It would have." She was quiet for a moment. "Gabrielle was right about you. You could have just asked her." "I did ask her," Fleur said, with the faintest suggestion of exasperation. "She told me to see for myself. She said I would understand when I did." She looked at him. She was right about that too. She stood. "One more thing." "What?" "Karkaroff is going to make a final move before the Confederation panel convenes. He has nothing left to lose by escalating. Whatever it is, it will be public. He needs to discredit the bond acknowledgement by making the situation around it look chaotic and contested." She straightened her robes. "I thought you should know that I've spoken to Madame Maxime. If something happens on Hogwarts grounds, Beauxbatons will not stand aside." Harry looked at her. "Thank you, Fleur." She gave him a slightly imperious look that was, he suspected, her version of "you're welcome," and walked away. Karkaroff moved on Friday night. Victor's warning came at dinner, a folded note passed down the Gryffindor table by a first-year who didn't know what it was, which meant Victor had sent it through about 4 people to keep it untraceable. Harry unfolded it under the table. "Tonight. After curfew. He's planning something at the lake, the Durmstrang ship. I think he intends to use the tournament's magical binding to create a public incident. Alexei overheard. He's going to claim you violated the tournament terms by attending the council meeting without Durmstrang's acknowledgement." He wants witnesses. He wants it loud. I will be at the lake. Come. Harry folded the note and looked at Ron across the table, who was looking back at him with the expression of someone who has been watching Harry receive cryptic notes all year and has opinions. You're about to go do something, Ron said. After curfew. At the lake. Harry paused. You don't have to come. I know I don't have to, Ron said, in the tone of someone who is going to come regardless. Is this the Durmstrang thing? The Bond thing? Yes. Right, Ron said, and went back to his dinner with the air of someone mentally rearranging his evening. I'll get my cloak. The lake at night had its own quality, still and wide and very dark, the Durmstrang ship a black silhouette with lit portholes, the grounds around it empty except for the specific non-emptiness of people trying to look like they weren't there. Harry counted 5 figures in the shadows near the ship's gangplank as he and Ron came around the edge of the path, and Viktor was standing halfway between the castle and the lake with Alexei at his shoulder. Karkaroff was there. This surprised Harry slightly. He'd expected Karkaroff to use proxies and maintain deniability. But Karkaroff was standing at the top of the gangplank in full formal robes, which told Harry something. He'd decided to make this theatrical rather than subtle. This was a performance. He wanted witnesses. He'd gotten them. Harry could see faces at the Durmstrang ship's portholes. He could see a group of Beauxbatons students at the edge of the grounds. Fleur had warned them, clearly, and they'd come. And down the path behind Harry came the sound of footsteps, Gabrielle, and 2 senior Beauxbaton students, moving quickly. Viktor saw Harry and walked to meet him. He's going to invoke Article 12 of the tournament charter, Viktor said quietly. It allows a school's headmaster to formally protest a champion's conduct between tasks. He's going to argue that your attendance at the council meeting constituted an unacknowledged political act that violated the tournament's neutrality provisions. That's not what Article 12 says, Harry said. No. But he's going to say it in front of witnesses and it will take weeks for the Confederation to formally reject it, during which the noise creates cover for the council filing to be challenged, Harry said. Yes. I know. He looked at Karkaroff on the gangplank. Does he have the legal text with him? Viktor blinked. I assume so. He had documents. I want to see the actual text, Harry said. If he's invoking Article 12, he has to read the provision. That's the procedure. How do you know the procedure? I asked Sarkova about every provision in the tournament charter last month. He looked at Viktor. When Karkaroff starts talking, I'm going to walk forward. Stay beside me. Viktor looked at him for a moment with that expression, the one that had moved past assessment into something more genuinely convinced. All right, he said. Gabrielle appeared at Harry's left side. She didn't ask what was happening, she'd clearly been briefed, or she'd read it in the bond. She was carrying her folder of diagrams, which made Harry look at her. You brought the diagrams to a confrontation, he said. I brought evidence, she said. To something that's about evidence. He almost smiled. Karkaroff descended the gangplank slowly, with deliberate stagecraft, and the group of Durmstrang students at the base of it arranged themselves in a way that was clearly choreographed, visible, formal, witnesses to a proceeding. Harry Potter, Karkaroff said, in his theatrical carrying voice. As headmaster of Durmstrang Institute, I invoke my right under Article 12 of the Triwizard Tournament Charter to formally contest the conduct of, read the provision, Harry said. Karkaroff paused. The theatrical momentum stuttered slightly. I invoke my right, Article 12, Section 1 requires the invoking party to read the relevant provision aloud before proceeding with a formal contest, Harry said. That's the procedure. Read it. In the quiet that followed, the sound of the lake was very clear. Karkaroff looked at Harry with an expression that was tightly controlled and, beneath the control, recalibrating. He reached into his robes and produced a document. Article 12, he said, with recovered composure, Section 1 states, he looked at the document. "Read it." There was a fractional pause, almost imperceptible, before he continued. "That a headmaster may formally contest the conduct of any champion whose actions between tasks are deemed to have violated the tournament's provision of institutional neutrality." "Institutional neutrality," Harry said. "Thank you." He looked around at the gathered witnesses, Durmstrang students, Beauxbatons students, Viktor, Alexei, Ron standing slightly behind Harry with his wand in his hand. "The council meeting I attended was arranged by the Southern Veela Council in response to a bond that exists on my body. The bond is not an institution. It is a magical connection. Attending a ceremony that acknowledges a personal bond is not an institutional act." He looked at Karkaroff. "Institutional neutrality means I can't do things that give one school formal advantage over the others in the tournament. Acknowledging a bond that predates the tournament by 5 years is not that." "The Veela Council is a magical institution," Karkaroff said. "The Veela Council is a family body," Harry said. "Gabrielle Delacour is not competing in the tournament. Fleur Delacour is Beauxbatons champion, not the council's representative. The council has no tournament standing." He paused. "You know this. You have a legal team and they know this too." The controlled expression on Karkaroff's face was doing something complicated. The theatrical certainty was draining out of it. "Your conduct has consistently," he began. "My conduct," Harry said, "has been to attend my classes, participate in the tournament tasks I was involuntarily entered in, and respond to a legal situation that you created by filing a false claim with the Slavic Magical Council 11 months ago." He looked at Karkaroff without heat. Without performance. Just the flat, clear delivery of facts. "The claim was false because you misread the branding provision you cited. Deliberately or not, I'm going to assume you had help and knew what you were doing. You filed a proprietary claim where the law allows only an obligation claim. The difference is significant." A long silence. "The young Delacour brought her diagrams," said a voice from behind Karkaroff, one of the senior Durmstrang students, male, and not Mikhail. Someone Harry didn't recognize. "What's in them?" Gabrielle stepped forward without waiting for anyone to give her permission. She walked past Viktor, past Harry, until she was standing in the open space between the two groups, and she opened her folder and held up the most recent diagram, the full resonance map, both brands overlapping, the triad structure that Madame Levine had read as a structure rather than a conflict. "The bond," she said, loudly enough for the gathered students to hear. "Both of them. Together. This is what Karkaroff's claim was trying to divide and control. This is what the council filing acknowledges." She held the diagram steady in the lake wind. "It's a structure. Not a possession. Not a claim. The Krum brand and the Veela bond reinforce each other. They always have. Anyone with basic magical theory can read this." She looked at the Durmstrang students directly. "This is your tradition on the left. Your branding, your history, your heritage. Someone used it for politics without asking the person whose hands it belongs to." The silence was different now. The quality of it had changed. Mikhail was in the group of Durmstrang students, and Harry watched his face and saw the expression there, not converted, not suddenly on Harry's side, but the specific expression of someone whose certainty has developed a crack that they're going to have to look at eventually. Yuri, the youngest one, the one from the east path, was looking at the diagram. His expression was simply open. Attending. Karkaroff looked at Gabrielle holding up the diagram, and at Harry standing with both his marked palms visible in the wand-lit dark, and at Viktor beside Harry, and something in his face went through several states in quick succession before arriving at something Harry had never seen in it before. Not defeat. Not capitulation. Something more like isolation. He was alone with his argument, and he knew it. "The Article 12 invocation," he said finally, and his voice was still composed but the theatrical quality was gone, "will be submitted formally to the Confederation." "That's your right," Harry said. Sarkova will respond to it along with the counter-brief. All of it will be in the same panel review. He looked at Karkaroff steadily. And the Durmstrang students who came out tonight to witness this, they've witnessed something. They can decide for themselves what they saw. Karkaroff looked at Harry for a long moment. What he was looking at, Harry knew, was the end of the political strategy he'd been building for a year. Not the end of his headmastership, not the end of Durmstrang, but the end of this specific play, the one where he'd entered a 14-year-old boy in a tournament without consent and tried to use an accidental magical bond as an institutional claim. The foundations of it had been coming apart for weeks, and now the last piece had given way, and Karkaroff was a man standing on a structure that had just stopped being a structure. He turned without another word and walked back up the gangplank. The Durmstrang students stood for a moment, looking between the retreating figure of their headmaster and the group on the bank. Then, by ones and twos, they dispersed. Mikhail last, he looked at Harry once, with that cracked certainty, and then turned and went. Yuri paused. Looked at the diagram Gabrielle was still holding. Can I? He stopped. Tried again. Could I have a copy of that? The diagram. To send to someone at home who studies branding theory. Gabrielle looked at him. Then she looked at Harry. Harry nodded. Gabrielle pulled a copy of the diagram from the middle of the folder. She'd brought extras, which Harry decided he shouldn't be surprised by, and held it out. Yuri took it carefully, like it might tear. Thank you, he said, to Gabrielle. Then, to Harry, I told them at Durmstrang. About the goblet. That Karkaroff submitted your name. He met Harry's eyes. I told the other students. Not the administration, I'm not, but the students. People should know. Thank you, Harry said. Yuri nodded and walked back to the ship. The bank gradually emptied. The Beauxbatons students headed back toward the castle, Fleur last, who caught Harry's eye as she turned and gave him a look that was complicated and communicative and resolved into a short nod that meant approximately, well done. Then she was gone. Viktor clapped Harry once on the shoulder, a single, solid, definite contact, and then walked away with Alexei, saying nothing, which from Viktor was a form of eloquence. Ron appeared at Harry's side. That, Ron said, was the strangest thing I have ever seen. And I once watched Fred and George release 100 garden gnomes into Aunt Muriel's sitting room. Sorry to drag you out here, Harry said. Are you? Ron said. Because that was brilliant, actually. Slightly terrifying. But brilliant. He paused. Did that girl just bring diagrams to a standoff? Yes. Right, Ron said. He looked at Gabrielle, who was calmly reorganizing her folder. She's something, isn't she? Yes, Harry said simply. He looked at his hands. The marks were visible in the darkness, both of them, clear and gold, the geometric and the curved, lit from within with the steady warmth that was their default state. The triad structure. The frequency. The thing Gabrielle had been drawing since she was 8. Gabrielle finished reorganizing her folder and came to stand beside him. They stood at the edge of the lake and the water was still and very dark and the castle was lit behind them and the Durmstrang ship sat in the black water and everything was quiet in the specific way of after. That's done, Gabrielle said. Most of it, Harry said. Sarkova still has to handle the Confederation panel. She'll handle it, Gabrielle said, with complete certainty. I know. What Yuri said, Gabrielle said. About telling people at Durmstrang. About the goblet. She looked at the ship. That's going to matter. When the panel reviews the case, it won't just be our legal argument. There will be students who know what Karkaroff did. That changes the politics. He changed the politics, Harry said. Yuri. He chose to. Gabrielle nodded. She was quiet for a moment. Then, Katya should have been here. I know, Harry said. He pressed his left palm flat against his side, the Krum brand, warm and clear. He thought about the letter she'd sent after the council meeting. I've read it 4 times. I don't have the right words yet. He thought about what he'd written in that letter. Not implied. Direct. The way Gabrielle had told him to. He thought about 3 years of letters, and books in brown paper parcels, and citations, and the precise controlled handwriting that slowly, incrementally, over 3 years, had started including more of the person behind the precision, more of what was actually there. She knows, Gabrielle said, reading something in his face or in the bond or in both. She's been there the whole time. Tonight too. I know, Harry said. The lake was still. Both marks warm on his hands. The castle at his back, lit and alive and old and his, in the way that Hogwarts had felt like his from the first moment he arrived. Ron was waiting on the path, eating something, with the patience of a person who has accepted that his best friend's life is permanently more complicated than other people's and has decided this is fine. Harry looked at him and felt the ordinary warm comfort of it, the uncomplicated version of belonging, the kind that doesn't require diagrams or legal briefs. Come on, Ron said. It's 10:30 and I'm freezing. Harry walked back up the path, both hands warm, the bond running clean and steady in the dark. Chapter 6, What the Brand Means. Sarkova's letter came on the morning of the 3rd task. Harry was already awake when the owl arrived, had been awake for an hour, sitting on the windowsill of the dormitory with both palms flat on the cold stone, feeling the marks and thinking about the maze that was waiting for him on the grounds below. The letter was 3 pages, and he read it by the early light with the particular attention he brought to anything from Sarkova, which was total. The Confederation panel had convened 4 days ago. Karkaroff's Article 12 invocation had been heard and rejected in under an hour. The procedural argument was, as Harry had suspected, too thin to survive scrutiny. But that had been the easy part. The harder part, the counterbrief, the council filing, the question of whether Karkaroff's original Article 7 claim had any legal standing, had taken 3 sessions and the testimony of 6 people, including Madame Levine, who had apparently given a statement about the bond's resonant nature that Sarkova described as the most precise piece of magical testimony I have heard in 30 years of Confederation work. The result, Karkaroff's claim had been formally rejected. Not tabled, not deferred, rejected. The panel's finding was that the bond could not be classified as a proprietary claim under any applicable tradition because its nature, as documented by the council filing and Gabrielle's submitted diagrams, was fundamentally incompatible with the legal category Karkaroff had tried to apply to it. The finding is final, Sarkova wrote. He can appeal to the full Confederation body, but the grounds for appeal are narrow and his legal team knows it. More practically, 3 of the 6 Durmstrang students who were present at the lake incident have submitted voluntary statements supporting the counterbrief's account of events. One of them is a 7th year named Yuri Borodin, whose statement includes a first-hand account of Karkaroff submitting your name to the goblet. The panel has referred this to the Confederation's disciplinary committee. Karkaroff's position at Durmstrang is, to put it plainly, untenable. Harry, the bond is on the record as yours. Both marks, both connections, both acknowledged. No institution has authority over it. That is now the documented position of the International Confederation of Wizards. Go do well in the maze. Mirela Sarkova. P.S. Madame Levine sends her regards. She said, and I am quoting exactly, tell the boy the bond knew what it was doing. I don't fully know what this means but I suspect you do. Harry folded the letter and sat with it for a moment. Both marks warm in the morning light. The maze was out there, built on the Quidditch pitch, enormous and dark even from this distance, and somewhere inside it was a portkey and a cup and whatever Karkaroff's people had arranged as a contingency, because there was a contingency, Harry was certain of it. The lake confrontation and the Confederation panel had stripped Karkaroff of his political strategy but not of whatever he'd set in motion before the political strategy failed. He thought about Quirrell. About the burning in his right hand that had tracked something dark through an entire school year when he was 11. About the night in the third-floor corridor and the mirror and what had been underneath all of it. He was older now and the understanding he had of the world's darker machinery was cleaner and less forgiving than it had been at 11, and the warmth in his right palm had been doing something specific for the past 2 weeks, not the sharp warning of the Mikhail incident, but a deeper, slower burn, like a coal rather than a spark. Something was waiting in the maze. He got up, got dressed, and went down to breakfast. Katya was at the Gryffindor table. This was not a thing that happened. Durmstrang students sat at their own tables in the Great Hall, by convention and by the unspoken territorial logic that had established itself since October. But Katya was sitting in the space next to Ron's usual seat, with a cup of tea and a book she wasn't reading, and when Harry came down the stairs and saw her, he stopped on the 3rd step from the bottom. She looked up. "Sarkova's letter," she said. "I got mine last night." "I got mine this morning," Harry said. He came down the last 3 steps and sat across from her because there wasn't a seat beside her and he wanted to see her face. "How?" "I asked Alexei to let me know if any seats were available," she said, which was Katya's version of "I arranged this because I wanted to be here." She looked at him with the direct dark eyes that he'd been reading in handwriting for 4 years and now had in person across a breakfast table. "The ruling." "Yes. It's done," she said. Not with triumph. With the tone of someone completing a calculation, the clean click of a proof resolved. "Mostly," Harry said. "There's still the maze." "I know." She looked at her tea. "I've been thinking about the maze." She looked up. "I've been thinking about it for 2 weeks. Something feels." She stopped. Pressed her right hand flat on the table. The Krum brand visible in the morning light. She looked at it. "This has been burning differently. Not the warning I know. Something deeper." "Mine too," Harry said. He put his left hand on the table beside hers, marks side by side, different patterns, same warmth. Both of them. She looked at their hands on the table and something moved in her face, the expression she had when she found the exact citation she'd been looking for, except applied to something that wasn't a text. "When I was 16, she said, "and I made the brand, I was angry that day. Not at you. At Viktor, at Durmstrang, at being Viktor Krum's sister in a school where that was the only interesting thing about me according to everyone except myself." She said it without bitterness, it was old enough to be stated plainly. "My magic went sideways and you were there and the brand happened and I spent 3 years being sorry about it." "You didn't need to be sorry," Harry said. "I know that now. I didn't know it then." She looked at her right hand, at the geometric mark. "What I want to tell you," she stopped. Started again. "Your letter. What you wrote after the council meeting. About both marks. About saying both." "It was true," Harry said. "It's always been true." "I know," she said. "I know it's true. I have always known it's true." She met his eyes. "But you said it in front of the council. You refused to let them have the bond without including the Krum brand. I was not there. You didn't need to. It didn't benefit you strategically." "Of course it benefited me strategically, Harry." She said his name the way she did it occasionally, flat and direct and more weight than the letters usually carried. "You know that's not why you did it." He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "It's not." She held his gaze. For someone who communicated primarily through precise handwriting and careful research, Katya Krum in person had a quality of directness that was entirely consistent with the letters and entirely more immediate than words on a page. She looked at him and he looked back and neither of them looked away. "For years of letters," she said. "I wrote to you every 2 weeks. I know. That's not," she made a small, frustrated gesture with her free hand. "I have never written to anyone every 2 weeks. I have never wanted to. I write to Viktor once a month because he is my brother and it is required. I wrote to you because I wanted to. For 4 years I wanted to, and I spent most of those 4 years telling myself it was because of the research. Because of the bond data. Because it was useful. She looked at her tea. It wasn't only that. I know, Harry said. She looked up sharply. You know. Gabrielle told me to tell you directly, he said. I'm also telling you directly. I've known since second year. Possibly first year. Possibly before that, but first year is when I could name it. Her expression did something he hadn't seen it do before. The control and the precision went somewhere else briefly, and what was underneath was younger and more unguarded and entirely real. Gabrielle, she said. Of course. She's perceptive, Harry said. She's 13 and she has been managing the emotional situation of the bond since she was 8 years old, Katia said, and the control came back but softer this time, with less effort. She sent me a diagram 2 years ago. I thought it was about the resonance mechanics. I've just recently understood what it was actually about. What was it about? The three of us, Katia said. The triad. She wasn't mapping the magical structure. She was mapping, she stopped. It wasn't a magical diagram. It was a map of what was actually happening. Harry thought about Gabrielle's diagrams, the hundreds of them, accumulated over 4 years of letters. The way they looked like magical theory and functioned as something more fundamental. The thing Madame Levine had read in them. Tell the boy the bond knew what it was doing. Yes, Harry said. Across the great hall, Viktor was sitting at the Durmstrang table watching them with an expression of carefully maintained neutrality. When Harry caught his eye, Viktor looked away with the studied indifference of someone absolutely minding their own business. Viktor knows, Harry said. Viktor has always known, Katia said. He simply prefers to pretend he doesn't because it requires him to have a conversation about feelings, which he finds extremely uncomfortable. She looked at Harry. He also thinks you're good. He told me that. Last night. It cost him something to say it and he said it anyway. Tell him I think he's good too, Harry said. She nodded. Then, quietly, come back from the maze. I intend to. That's not, she looked at him with the direct, flat quality of someone who has decided honesty is the only currency worth using. Come back. Whatever is in there, the burning in my hand, come back. Yes, Harry said. Not reassurance. Agreement. A statement of intent made to someone who deserved the real version rather than the comfortable version. She picked up her tea. He picked up toast. They sat in the ordinary comfortable silence of people who know each other well, and the morning light came through the great hall windows, and the marks were warm on both their hands. Gabrielle found him an hour before the task. He was on the grounds, doing one last walk of the maze's exterior, not trying to map it, just feeling the quality of the magic inside it, the way he'd learned to read magical signatures from 5 years of the brands doing exactly that. The maze's enchantments were dense and layered, the way old magic got when it had been added to over time, and underneath the official tournament enchantments there was something else. Something that had been added more recently and had a different texture, sharper, less organic, with the specific quality of magic that's been made to conceal rather than simply to exist. Someone had added something to the maze that shouldn't be there. Gabrielle came around the hedge at the corner of the pitch with her folder and sat down on the low stone wall that edged the grounds, and Harry sat beside her. You feel it, she said. Something in the maze that isn't tournament magic, Harry said. 2 days ago, she said. I felt it in the bond, the right-hand burn you and Katia have been tracking. It went sharper. I think, she opened her folder to the most recent diagram, the one she'd been working on for the past week. I think it's connected to the dark thing from your first year. The signature you tracked through Quirrell. Harry looked at the diagram. She'd been drawing the signature, the quality of the darkness he'd felt in the maze, and it had a specific shape in her visual language, a pattern that appeared in her diagrams of his first year too, the ones she'd drawn when he described the Quirrell situation in his letters. The same pattern. 2 years apart. Voldemort, Harry said. I don't know that name in magical signature terms, Gabrielle said carefully. But the pattern matches. Whatever it is, it's connected to the same source. She looked at the maze. It's in the cup. The portkey, it's been charmed to take you somewhere specific. Not the finish line. Somewhere else. Harry was quiet. I know because the bond went cold for about 4 seconds when I got close to the maze yesterday, Gabrielle said. Cold, not warm. The bond goes cold when something threatens the triad at a fundamental level. I've only felt it go cold once before, and that was the night at the East Path when Mikhail had his wand out. She looked at him. This was deeper than that. How do you know it's the cup and not the maze itself? Because the coldness had a direction, she said. It was coming from the center. From wherever the cup is. She closed the folder. I've written to Sarkova. She can't get here in time for the task but she's trying. She paused. Dumbledore, I've tried to tell Dumbledore things before, Harry said. He listens and he acts, but on his own timeline and in his own way. He has the whole board in his head and he's not always willing to show you where the pieces are. He looked at the maze. I'm not going to wait for Dumbledore. I know, Gabrielle said. I just wanted you to know I tried that avenue. He looked at her. What does the bond say? Not the cold, after the cold. What does it say now? She looked at her right hand for a long moment. That you're going to be in there tonight, she said. That something will happen. And that, she stopped. What? That you'll come back, she said. The bond is, it's very clear about that. You'll come back. She met his eyes. I trust the bond. So do I, Harry said. She put her hand over his right hand, the same gesture she'd made when she was 8 years old, holding his palm in both of hers in a sitting room at Cavendish Court while adults argued around them. The same warmth. The same ease. The burning in the Veela sigil steadied, not went away, but found a level, the way a fire finds its level when it's been fed properly. I've been drawing you for 6 years, she said, looking at their hands. I drew you before I knew you. I drew the bond before I understood it. I draw things before they're finished and then they finish and they match. She looked up. I've been drawing something new for the past month. I don't know what it is yet. I think I will after tonight. Will you show me after? He said. Yes, she said. When you come back. He turned his hand over and she took it properly, fingers interlaced, natural, the way it had always been natural between them, without either of them deciding to make it a thing. He held her hand for a minute in the afternoon light outside the maze, and the marks were warm and the bond was clear and whatever was waiting inside the hedge was waiting regardless, so there was no reason not to sit here a minute longer. The maze swallowed him at dusk. He moved through it with the methodical focus of someone who has learned to trust instinct that is better than calculation, turning right at intersections where the right palm burn went quieter, turning left where it sharpened, not working against the warning but with it, treating the bond's threat response like the navigational instrument it apparently was. He got through the first 3 obstacles without breaking stride, a blast-ended scrut he redirected with a stunning spell, a boggart he dismissed with an ease that would have surprised his third-year self, a stretch of mist that confused orientation until he pressed his left palm flat on the hedge wall and felt the enchantment structure and walked through it in a straight line while it tried to turn him. He found Cedric Diggory 20 minutes in, at an intersection, pinned down by a confundus charm radiating from one of the hedges rather than from any obvious caster. Harry dissolved the charm, and Cedric looked at him with the surprised gratitude of someone not expecting to be helped. You all right? Harry said. Yeah. Cedric stood. That charm, it's been there for days. That's not tournament magic. No, Harry said. Someone added things to this maze that shouldn't be here. The cup is the end point, keep that in mind. Cedric looked at him. What's at the cup? A portkey that goes somewhere it shouldn't. He looked at the intersection. Don't touch the cup until we know where it goes. We? Cedric said. We're both still in this, Harry said. Come on. They moved through the maze together, and Harry's hands were warm and calibrated and the right palm burn went steadily deeper the closer they got to the center, not as a warning now but as a pressure, like weather, like something atmospheric building. He tracked it and didn't flinch from it, and when they came around the last corner and the cup was there in its pillar of blue light, he stopped 10 feet short and looked at it. The cup was radiating the dark signature Gabrielle had mapped. Dense, compressed, old. The specific quality of something that had been wound into the object with great deliberate care by someone who understood portkey magic at a fundamental level. Don't go any closer, Harry said. It's the finish line, Cedric said, not moving closer but looking at it with the expression of someone who has been working toward a thing for months. It's a portkey to somewhere designed by whoever made Quirrell turn around wrong in the corridors when I was 11, Harry said. And whoever sent the dark mark up over the World Cup campsite. He looked at the cup. And whoever has been pushing Karkaroff strings this whole year. Cedric was quiet for a moment. You're sure? The Bond has been tracking this signature for 4 years, Harry said. Yes. I'm sure. Your Bond, Cedric said. The marks. Yes. Cedric looked at Harry's hands, at the faint glow of the marks in the maze's low light, both of them, the geometric and the curved. He'd never asked about them directly. Harry had gathered he'd noticed them since October and chosen not to ask, which was a form of respect he appreciated. What do we do? Cedric said. Harry looked at the cup. He thought about the cold that Gabrielle had felt, the deep cold, the Bond going cold for 4 seconds. He thought about what he knew of the magical signature in the cup, the compressed, deliberate, patient darkness of something that had been building a return for 13 years and had found a mechanism. He thought about Madame Levine, tell the boy the Bond knew what it was doing. He reached into his robes. He had his wand, which he'd been using throughout the maze. He had the marks on his hands, which had been navigating the maze more reliably than the wand. And he had 3 years of Katia's books, and 4 years of Gabrielle's diagrams, and the specific understanding of magical structure that came from being, since the age of 9, a living node in a magical bond that Madame Levine had called the most precisely documented she'd read in decades. He walked toward the cup. Harry, Cedric said. I'm not going to touch it, Harry said. He stopped 2 feet from the cup. This close, the dark signature was a pressure against both his palms, the brands responding to it actively now, not as warning but as something more assertive. Like 2 tuning forks vibrating against a discordant note. I'm going to look at how it's built. He held both palms up, facing the cup. The marks were bright now, both of them, clearly visible, the 2 patterns radiating their respective warmth, and it mixed in the air between his hands and the cup, gold against the cold dark of the portkey's enchantment. He could feel the structure of it. Not see it, feel it, the way you feel a building's layout through its vibrations when you press your hand against a wall. The portkey was built in layers, an outer shell of normal portkey magic, dense and legitimate, and inside that something else. Something compressed tight around a destination, a specific place, and inside that a third layer that was not portkey magic at all but something older and more specific, magic that required a specific type of magical signature to complete its function. It needed his signature. Not any wizard. His. The scar on his forehead and the specific quality of his magical core, the thing that Gabrielle had been drawing as gold and very large since she was 8. Whoever had built this had built it for him specifically, and it would activate fully only when he touched it. Which meant if Cedric touched it, Cedric, Harry said, if you touch the cup, it won't take you where it's aimed. It needs my specific signature to complete the terminus enchantment. What does that mean? It means it won't take you to Voldemort, Harry said plainly. It'll take you somewhere random. Still dangerous, Portkeys without a stable destination are dangerous, but not what they planned. Cedric absorbed this. How do you know it needs your signature specifically? Because someone spent a year trying to establish an institutional claim over me through the bond, Harry said. And when that failed, they moved to a direct approach. He looked at the cup. The bond has been tracking this signature for years. It knows what this is reaching for. He turned both palms toward the cup, marks fully bright, and pushed. Not a spell. Not intentional magic in the formal sense. He didn't have a word for what he did, didn't have a charm or an incantation or even a conscious decision. It was the bond's inherent function, the amplified, lens-focused, triad-resonant magic that had been building since he was 9 years old, doing what it did when something threatened the triad. The two marks worked simultaneously, geometric and flowing, the Krum tradition and the Veela instinct, and the combined output was something that hit the Portkey's enchantment structure the way a clean note hits a cracked glass. The false destination, the dark terminus, the compressed waiting place, shattered. The sound it made was not loud. More like a correction. A note finding its proper pitch. The cup sat in its pillar of blue light, inert now, a genuine tournament cup with a genuine finish line portkey inside it and nothing else. Harry stood in front of it with both palms raised and both marks blazing and felt the bond settle, the warmth coming back fully and cleanly, the cold gone completely, and somewhere beyond the maze he could feel the triad resonance shift the way Gabrielle had described in her letters, the bond responding to resolution the way it responded to everything else, which was completely and immediately and without hesitation. Cedric walked up beside him. Looked at the cup. Looked at Harry. Did you just? Yes, Harry said. Can you? Apparently, Harry said. He lowered his hands. Both marks fading slowly back to the invisible warmth that was their normal state. The cup is clean now. It's just the cup. Cedric looked at him for a long moment. You should probably take it, he said. You should be the one to take it. We take it together, Harry said. Harry, Cedric. Harry looked at him. You've worked for this for 4 years. I was entered in this tournament by someone else's agenda. You take the cup. Cednet looked at the cup. Then at Harry. Something genuine and uncomplicated moved across his face, the expression of someone offered something they weren't expecting and don't quite know how to carry. Together, he said. You said together. Harry nodded. They stepped forward together and closed their hands around the cup's handles. The portkey activated. The world turned over. They arrived on the grounds in a rush of wind and noise and the blaze of the tournament lights, and the crowd sound hit like a wave, and Harry was on his knees on the grass with one hand still on the cup and the other hand flat on the ground, feeling the solid specific reality of the Hogwarts grounds humming under his palm. Both marks warm. He pressed his forehead to the cool grass for exactly 1 second, let the realness of the ground be as real as it was, and then stood up. The aftermath was loud and prolonged and full of adults, which was predictable. Dumbledore was there immediately. Dumbledore was always immediately everywhere that mattered, which Harry had come to understand was not omniscience but something like a very well-developed instinct for where the center of gravity in a situation was. He looked at Harry with those penetrating eyes and Harry told him, straightforwardly, what had happened, the dark signature in the cup, the false destination, the specific connection to the magical signature he'd been tracking since first year. Dumbledore listened with the particular quality of attention he brought to things that confirmed something he'd been thinking. The portkey's destination, he said. Little Hangleton, Harry said. The signature felt like it was aimed at a graveyard. I don't know how I know that. I just do. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Your bonds, he said. Yes, Harry said. The dual resonance has given you a sensitivity to magical signatures that is, quite remarkable. He looked at Harry over his half-moon spectacles. I should have spoken to you about this more directly. I have been, he paused, which was unusual. Dumbledore was not a man who paused often. I have been managing the larger situation and I haven't always remembered that you are in the middle of it and you deserve more information than I've given you. That's honest of you, Harry said. You are owed honest, Dumbledore said simply. We will speak tomorrow. Properly. He looked at Harry's hands. Are the brands? They're fine, Harry said. They worked exactly as they were supposed to. He found Katya, Gabrielle, and Viktor all in the same place, the entrance to the stands, where they'd been watching, which was technically where they were supposed to be and technically where Viktor had kept them through an effort of will that was visible on his face as a kind of strained composure. Katya looked at him. That was all. She looked at him, and the relief in her expression was exactly as complete and unguarded as the moment of honesty over breakfast had been, the Katya behind the precision, full and present. He walked to her first. She crossed the remaining distance and put her hands on both sides of his face and looked at him with those dark direct eyes and said, "You're all right." "I'm all right," he said. She exhaled. Released him. Stepped back with the controlled composure reassembling itself, but more slowly this time, and what it assembled into was softer than usual. "The bond went clear," she said. "About 40 minutes ago. The cold just left." "I know when," Harry said. "What happened in there?" "I'll explain properly. Later." He looked at her. The bond knew what it was doing. Her expression shifted, the ghost smile, warmer than usual. "Sarkova said that." "Madame Levine said it first." "Through Sarkova." Katya shook her head slightly, with the fond exasperation she applied to things she found both absurd and correct. "An ancient Veela elder communicating approval of my Slavic tradition brand through a Swiss Confederation mediator," she said. "The world is strange." "The bond makes it strange," Harry said. "I think that's the point." Gabrielle was beside him before he finished the sentence, no preamble, no dramatic moment, just Gabrielle doing what she always did, which was appearing where she needed to be with the calm certainty of someone who has already seen how this goes. She put her arms around him with the uncomplicated ease that had always characterized the way she navigated the bond, no excess, no performance, just the real and exact version of what she felt. He held on. Over her shoulder, Viktor caught his eye and gave him a look of stoic brotherly acceptance that was the funniest thing Harry had seen all week. "Viktor," Harry said. "Don't," Viktor said, with great dignity. "I wasn't going to say anything." "You had a look." "I didn't have a look." "You had Katya's look. When she is about to say something irritating but correct." Viktor crossed his arms. "Karkaroff was arrested an hour ago. The disciplinary committee had a warrant ready, they were waiting for the task to finish." He said it with the flat satisfaction of someone delivering a fact that has been a long time coming. "He's gone." Harry looked at Viktor for a moment. "Are you all right?" Viktor considered this with the seriousness he brought to direct questions. "He was my headmaster for 4 years. He was a coward who chose wrong things for small reasons." He paused. "I am satisfied. That is not the same as all right, but it is sufficient." Gabrielle had stepped back. She was looking at Harry with that clear, forward-focused quality, the look that meant she was seeing something. "The diagram I've been working on," she said. "The one you said you didn't understand yet," Harry said. "I understand it now." She opened her folder. Produced the most recent one, the one she'd been working on for a month, that she'd said she'd show him after. She held it out. He took it. It was different from the other diagrams. All the other ones had been about the bond's mechanics, the resonance, the triad structure, the overlapping patterns. This one was about something harder to draw, and she'd found a way to draw it anyway in the way that was specifically her gift. 3 forms at the center, not abstracted, not reduced to sigils, but genuinely rendered in that semi-realistic style she used when she wanted to draw something true rather than something theoretical. The 3 of them. The marks on 2 of the hands. And around it, Not a cage, not a boundary, but something that read as the opposite of a cage. An opening. Like the structure in the center was generating something outward. Not contained but emanating. He looked at it for a long time. The bond is not a chain, Gabrielle said softly, the line from the council filing, the one she'd written in French at the bottom of the last page. It's a choice. Made by 3 people, Harry said. Whether or not they know they're making it, Katia completed, from beside him. He looked at both of them, Katia with her controlled warmth and her 4 years of letters and the ghost smile she kept giving him in the softer light, and Gabrielle with her diagrams and her certainty and her gift for seeing the thing clearly before it was finished. He pressed his left palm to his side. Pressed his right palm to his side. Both marks warm, both steady, the dual resonance that Madame Levine had called a structure. Something built. Right, Harry said. Not concluding anything. Not summarizing. Just acknowledging the realness of the moment, the way you acknowledge weather, it's here, it's true, it's yours. He handed the diagram back to Gabrielle. She took it and put it carefully in the middle of the folder where the most important things lived. Viktor put his hand on Harry's shoulder briefly. The school year is almost done, he said. What happens after? Sarkova wants a follow-up meeting, Harry said. About the Confederation's ongoing oversight of the bond situation, making sure the record holds and nobody finds a new angle. Not about that, Viktor said. The summer. Where are you? Surrey, Harry said, with the flat effect he applied to Surrey. Come to Bulgaria, Viktor said. Katia will be there. I will be there. My mother, he paused. My mother wants to meet you. She has wanted to meet you for 4 years and Katia kept saying it wasn't the right time. It wasn't, Katia said. It is now, Viktor said, and it had the finality of someone making a decision that should have been made earlier. Gabrielle looked at Harry. Maman wants us in the south for August. The Sea House. She paused. Madame Levine will be visiting. She said she has the old records she mentioned, the ones about the dual bond case 600 years ago. Her eyes were bright with the specific brightness they got when there was research involved. She'll only show them if you come. She said that specifically. She's trying to lure me with 600-year-old documents, Harry said. Is it working? Gabrielle asked. He thought about July in Bulgaria, the Krum family, Viktor's mother, Katia with no Durmstrang and no letters between them, just the actual space of a summer. He thought about August in France, the sea house Gabrielle had been describing in letters since she was 8, and Madame Levine with her sharp amused eyes and whatever was in those records. He thought about Surrey. Yes, he said. It's working. Gabrielle smiled, the full one, the warm surprised one that she'd given him on the East Path and again in the library and that he'd decided he'd like to see as frequently as possible for as long as the bond lasted, which was, by all accounts, forever. The tournament's lights were still blazing over the pitch. Somewhere in the castle the celebration had started, voices, music, the specific noise of several hundred people who've been holding tension for 3 hours and just let it go. The grounds were warm and dark and the marks on Harry's hands were the quiet steady warmth that had been his since he was 9 years old on a window seat in a manor, watching lanterns drift through hedgerows, not knowing yet that the burning in his palms was the beginning of something. He knew now. He knew exactly what it was, not a claim, not a chain, not a political tool or an institutional asset or an accident of wild magic that should be apologized for. It was a frequency. A structure. A choice made by 3 people before they were old enough to understand they were making it, and confirmed by each of them, over 4 years of letters and diagrams and arguments and lakeside confrontations and Confederation filings, into something actual. Something permanent. Something theirs. He walked back toward the castle with both hands warm and both marks present and invisible in his, and Viktor was to his left complaining about the Hogwarts food with the energy of someone who has been pretending not to notice it for 9 months, and Katya was to his right saying something precise and accurate about the inadequacy of British culinary standards, and Gabrielle was just ahead of them, already sketching something on the back of a page from her folder, her pen moving with the certainty of someone who knows what she's drawing before she draws it. The castle doors were open and lit from within. Harry pushed his hands into his pockets, both marks warm, and went inside.